Hello. Oh, I see what you're saying now. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Band Batch Andor Music and Sound Chats. Hey, it's just the two of us, like the very, very old
Yeah,
days.
like
Others will be
music chat
joining.
days. That's
Yes,
right.
like the Bad Batch season 1 days.
Yeah, for the first two episodes, it was just me and you,
Yeah, that was
and we
fun.
were a lot we were a lot less sassy back then. Um,
That's true. That's true.
I did watch those originals, and we were much more like we were a little bit more cagey with our opinions
Like more
back then. I think.
diplomatic.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I
Um,
have to go back. Maybe I should go back and watch one of those.
yeah.
But anyway, how is everyone? How did you like Andor episode 9? Um, Something's about to go down next episode, clearly.
Yes. It just gets better. I feel like it just gets better and better every week somehow. Um, it's so well done. I keep thinking like, oh, one of these episodes is going to be a disappointment, or it's going to be a dip, or they're gonna or something. And I just feel like this episode just ramped me up even more with how much I love this show.
I feel like I stopped being able to like because they're all just like good to me. I can't. I'm not even. I don't have to think about that anymore. Which with other shows, sometimes I feel like the
Sure.
ones that are good stand out to me.
Right.
And so it's actually very freeing for me to feel like I am just along for the ride. Like for me, the prison arc has been probably on a just pure enjoying it in the momentness, probably less enjoyable for me, but still, I'm still very invested because I'm very invested in the whole series. So I don't see it as like, oh, these are slower episodes. I just see it as sort of like part of the whole show. And so, yeah.
Well, it definitely got more interesting for me, the prison arc, with this revelation at the end of this episode. I think it made the whole situation even somehow even more sinister. And I think that solidified that particular situation as being something that I'm definitely interested in seeing how it plays out. Um, because it's kind of revealing that there's that there's some like ultimate futility in any of their playing by any of the rules, um,
Yeah, I heard in the music, I feel like we heard a lot of horror type things or a lot of atmospheric sort of music. Um, like clustery things that are just sort of like almost ambient sounding in the prison, and it kind of I don't know, it feels ominous, and it feels
yes,
like the holding pattern that kind of music can sometimes feel like, since there's not like a
right,
clear time, to it. There's not a clear arc to it in, either time wise or like melody wise. It's just sort of like there and
yeah,
omnipresent.
yes, the ominous kind of washy tune, not super in tune drones and there's also seemingly I clocked like a lot of moments where their alarm is blaring in the prison throughout this episode. Like there's this is like an alarm filled episode, um, which was just gives you a sense of anxiety in every scene because it seems like and then we find out that very clearly something is going wrong, quite often.
Yeah.
Eh, Yeah.
Do you know like where one of the alarm parts what happened?
Yeah, specifically when they're
Like on the bridge?
on the bridge and like Andy Serkis's character is like telling everybody to just fall in line. They don't know anything. Um, and they're like, something's wrong on two,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah. Regarding the like horror, that's such a hard word to say. Horror,
Horror.
hor- horror cues. Um, like at least in one spot there was a slight sort of crescendo where, first of all, there was that a little bit of and then getting louder, and then sort of like a drop off to a single sustained like high pitched thing that's almost like like tinnitus-y,
Yeah.
like just sort of like a little, yeah, like a little uh, insect or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sound um reminds me a little bit of the, I mean, not so much on the nose, but we had a lot of those little moments in Bad Batch, um,
Yeah.
with the ear ringing effect, and it just
Yes.
kind of, it's kind of that like shit's getting real effect, right? Um, which was, and we got a little bit of that explored. Um, Not so much the ringing, but like the silence being sucked out during the interrogation scene, which
Yeah.
was was really disturbing.
Yeah, I think,
Um,
I mean, yeah, we'll get to that because I think one of
yeah.
the most interesting things about this episode was sort of like sound played a diegetic role, like a big role in what was going on. Like sound was part of the torture.
Yes.
And uh, we personally weren't hearing anything on screen, but yeah, I think that is a very interesting thing. I mean, I always like when
Mm.
sound is kind of acknowledged as being sort of an important element of something on screen. But going back to the
Yeah, and
horror
this
cues,
show is like the sound show, you know? Like
yeah,
this, there's so many points throughout this show so far that highlights like sound is not just something that's important in the score to highlight the feelings, but it's actually like featured in the plot and the environment of the show. We've got like the bell tower ringer, we've got the people clocking on the the bell tin cans. Now
yeah,
we've got like sound torture
yeah,
on Ferrex. Now we, you know, it's there's quite a focus on sound making um in the show. And you know, the diegetic music of the Aldanis, right? So interestingly focused on sound. It's they definitely like, there's like a theme of sound throughout this show, which is
yeah.
super interesting.
Like sound being important. Um, I think
Yes.
like because there is so much silence in this show, especially during dialogue, I think the horror underscore stands out more than it perhaps would in something else where, you know, we can just take it for granted that there's always going to be a bed of something underneath dialogue because in the show there's not always a bed of music underneath dialogue. And so just hearing the ambient, you know, like really softly
Mm.
kind of industrial sounding stuff underneath the prison sequences, it lent itself to, I don't know, something, just something being off but not being able to place exactly like what is off about it. And I mean that's
Right.
kind of how they're feeling. You know, that's how the characters are feeling. They're like they don't know exactly what's going on, just like in that kind of music you can't pick out like, well, the cello's doing this and the, you
Right.
know, flute's doing that and the, you know. And another thing is like you brought up the tinnitus where we did hear those sounds in the bad batch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I can't remember the other example you heard, but you said, but in in the Bad Batch, if I recall, it was like a sort of, it was a literal like,
Yeah.
it was a representation of something happening on screen that would result in like tinnitus, like
Yes.
we like bang bang, and
Absolutely.
then sort of POV the person who was experiencing tinnitus. And here it's sort of like not a literal application of a tinnitus like sound. It's more like it's just there. It's not supposed to represent Kino's tinnitus or something. It's just sort of like the audience, everyone being like, is something here or not?
Right. It gives you, it's what I remember reading a kind of a funny description of what anxiety feels like, and I don't remember where it was from, but somebody described it as it's like when the boss music in a video game starts, but you can't, but you're like walking around, you can't find like you can't find the enemy anywhere, right? It's like you can hear the music that's telling you like you're about to be in like a fight, but you haven't seen the enemy yet, right? It's like something's going on, but I don't see the evidence of yet of what's wrong, right? So you've got this like anxiety-inducing music, and it's all kind of tense, but it hasn't like hit the fan just yet. It's like it's amping and building, building, building to something. And ultimately what we find out what's wrong is what's happening, at the end of the episode when they reveal that like what happened down in 2 is that everybody did like was killed, and which means that no one's getting out of that prison.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, we were talking last week about at what point different characters break and give up on trying to work within the system. Because, right, some characters are more motivated to continue working with the system if they're either at the top of the system or they're almost going to be out, like if they're almost going to be done serving their time, or if they, feel like they've almost conquered the impossible system, then they might be more motivated to not rebel. They might be more motivated to just be like, I'm almost going to get mine. And so we were
Yes.
kind of wondering about Kino, and it's like until this point, it felt like Kino had a pretty high threshold for, what he would be swayed by. He was not going to rebel before. He was not
Right.
going
No,
to.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because he had the promise of getting out of there, within a year, right? Or whatever 200, what's the word? It's
Shifts. Shifts?
shifts, right?
Yeah, and I'm
I'm
not
guessing
sure how
that
many.
means a day.
Okay,
Or
is it per day? I wasn't sure.
I think so because they like go to sleep in between their shifts, right? So,
Right.
but who knows? I mean, I don't think they're. I think they're being purposely vague about that. But yeah, I think it's kind of a extreme allegory for what's happening outside the prison in the general galaxy, right?
Say more.
In some way, it's like, like everybody is, ostensibly in a prison, but they don't know it yet, right? It's like they're all being, the galaxy is being controlled and completely colonized and taken over by the Empire. But everyone's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna take care of mine. It's okay. I'll just get through it, and I'll just make sure that I don't need to rebel against anything. I don't need to like break the Empire or anything. I'll just like do my thing, right? And that's kind of what this is going on in this prison, which is everybody is like, I'm just gonna do my thing, take care of my own, and eventually I'll survive, right? I'll get out of this prison. But then what comes to pass is because of this PORID thing, seemingly, everybody becomes aware like, oh, this isn't going away. Everybody's ultimately in danger here, and the only way to ensure all of our survival and freedom is to actually overthrow this whole thing. So I think there's kind of a microcosm to the decision that the rebels end up having to take, but we see it inside this prison where they see like, oh, they finally see a real atrocity, right? Like it's all pretty oppressive, and that's even what they said right in the beginning of the episode, which was or not the beginning of the episode, but the beginning of his imprisonment, right? Don't they say something along the lines of like, this is minimally invasive,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, that's the reason why we don't have to like kill all of you all the time, is because we have these things to control you. And that's kind of like what the Empire is doing. Like, we're minimally invasive. We control you, but
We're helping you control your planets.
yes, exactly. But then they actually have to do something because one of them gets out there and comes right back and says, guys, we're not getting out. And then the Empire completely overreacts and kills the whole thing. And then watch what's going to happen. Everybody's going to rebel and overthrow them. So this is kind of like a brilliant actually a brilliant metaphor for what actually is happening at a wider scale in the galaxy. Is this whole thing, right?
I totally
So,
agree. Hey, Justin.
hey, Justin.
Hi.
That it is a
Sorry,
great. We're talking about like the metaphor. Well, James just was talking about the metaphor of the prison. I don't know, being a metaphor for what's happening in the greater galaxy, and well, what I'm thinking of is remember Orn Frita on Ryloth?
Orn Frita.
Okay,
Yeah,
on
who's
Who?
that
Ryloth.
again?
I might have missed that one.
Okay, it was in the Bad Batch.
Yeah, who is that?
Well, in the
Yeah, he's the guy that gets the senator that gets shot, right, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Or
right,
not a
right,
senator,
right,
but
right,
Right.
right.
However, like Hera's parents were wanting to resist, the Empire, and Orn Frita was sort of like just in with them, just like whatever, like kind of
right.
yeah, in the system for sure. Um, but like a lot of people on Ryloth didn't really see what the big problem was with the Empire. Like, I mean, they weren't like super happy about it, but it was really like Hera's parents who kind of knew what was going on and how, they're. It starts with like one thing, and then it becomes like another thing, and then it's like full control, and yeah. Anyway,
And that's what Mon Mothma is warning everybody at the end. This is just the next step, the next step, the next step towards these things. And if we keep letting tiny little things slide, next thing you know, all sorts of things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. There we are.
And just we're done. Thank you for dropping by.
Cue the
Oh,
music.
man.
Said another great Andor episode. I've been digging the variations on the opening title card. Yeah, this
Oh,
one was
yeah.
this one was a raucous opening.
Yeah.
Or it was like
Yeah.
wait, I think I'm echoing. Okay. Oh, it's gone. Okay. Okay. It was like Andor Club Mix or something. It was very.
Well, it was.
Oh wait,
Oh, is that?
am I coming out of someone's speaker?
No.
You were coming out of mine for a moment.
Okay.
Ah, okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, this opening theme. Our prediction so far has been correct. It keeps getting more and more electronic as we get
Right.
farther and farther. You think of the first episode where it's just these gorgeous strings, right? And then now it's this. It sounded like to me it was a combination of the prison music, the Namtic 5, Namric 5.
Niamos.
The
The Club
yes.
Mix? Yeah.
No, the
Narkina
music.
5.
Narkina 5. It's the music from Narkina 5. It's got the bum 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 bum. This like cool arpeggiation going on in the same arpeggiating order, kind of a thing. Arpeggios are just broken up chords. We play the notes one at a time instead of all at the same time. Synthesizers have this great feature called an arpeggiator,
We
which
love
is
the arpeggiator.
everyone's favorite toy to play with on
Oh,
a
yeah.
synthesizer, where you just hold down the notes and it just goes do 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 just for you automatically at any. Oh, I love them in any order and any things like that. So that opening theme used that kind of arpeggiation, that synth arpeggiation that we hear a lot in all the Namtic. I already forgot the name.
Narkina.
Narkina.
Niantic.
Namtech.
Like Pokemon
Namtech. Oh my goodness. Yeah, like Narkina 5 and then crossed with like these kind of lush sounding synth strings. It kind of reminds me of that classic like 70s, 80s. I don't have an orchestra, but I have a keyboard kind of a thing, kind of sound. I don't know. I really dug it. And then we get this crazy percussion that we've been hearing kind of throughout some of these
like
other episodes, James. Kind of a thing happening underneath.
Yeah, totally. I totally remember what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's like
Yeah,
It's
like right at the very end, we get a doom doom doom. You know.
wow, we're doing it. Exactly like this. Yes.
Yeah, but it was a great
Yeah.
theme.
Yes.
It was a great constant evolution of this theme, you know,
Yeah, at some
especially as
points
an
I almost
opening.
felt like it was like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of had all the flavors in it, you know, that boots and cats, but without the cats, just the
God
boots.
damn it! This is what happened
Boots
when
only.
the percussionist forgets to do his homework for the.
then you have to hear me going like
Then I have to hear everybody else go
Yeah,
like, yeah, I
yeah.
swear it was like a, or like a more like a, or maybe it was like
Yeah,
more
you
like
know,
a doom.
You know, the boots, James. You know the boots.
All right, I'll just take your word for it.
there were lots of boots.
Lots of boots in this
I
one.
will say that like I don't think the strings were necessarily, yeah, they were lush in the '70s lush way, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is very thin and not lush.
Yeah,
Which
thin
is
and,
in contrast to earlier.
Whoa.
That's some shade.
Some shade on there. You don't like a lush synth string chord, just
You're the one
like, you
assigning
know.
value to me saying lush versus not lush. I just said if we're talking about lushness, it was not lush like real strings, which is not which I don't bring up to diss the lushness, the relative lushness of the '70s synth strings.
This wasn't
but
trying
rather-
to be real strings.
but
yeah.
rather to
Right,
compare
right.
it to the other openings of the Andor, which you know
Yes.
did use like real strings. So sort of the contrast is there.
And with
I think the two of you-
wobble, I was gonna say, and with the wobble, then we get the other kind of lush, right? So maybe these are those kinds of lush strings, or like they've been drinking a little.
I think the two of you should have a lush off next week.
A lush off. I'll come prepared. All my synth patches, all my string patches.
That's really funny.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The arpeggiator was like definitely a big, probably the defining aspect of this opening, I think. Because it was so incessant. It's driving, you know?
And it kind of reminds us of where we are. You know, we're still trapped within this. You know, our main protagonist, double main protagonist. Andor is like, you know, still stuck here. We're still in this world. It kind of like reminds us without a last time on Andor. Although we did have a last time on Andor, but kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also, not just for Andor, but everyone else, whenever Vel visits her cousin Mon Mothma, she's kind of just saying, it's happened, like, there's no escape. It's getting to a point where it's closing in and there's no escape. Everybody is either going to be having to say that they're a rebel pretty soon, is what it feels like, or like hiding is not going to be so possible moving forward. That seemed to be a theme throughout the episode. Speaking of the theme of no escape, the discoveries of the poor prisoners in Narkina 5 that they will not be released of the prison's free will.
What do you think is... Oh, Jonah just came back from listening to the Volume 2 soundtrack. Did that drop today? Okay. I haven't listened yet.
It's funny. I was
But-
just thinking, damn, I can't wait for the soundtrack.
Jonah, did you notice anything in the soundtrack that illuminated some things that we've been talking about? You know, like sometimes the soundtrack gives us names to things, or whatnot. Let us know. So, James and I kind of talked about like overall thoughts about this episode, sort of, and a couple things that stood out to us. But Justin and Christina, what stood out to you?
Oh man.
Like we were talking about the horror cues.
Yeah, there was a lot of horror cues in here. There is some really, really intricate usage of silence in this, like silence in lieu of a score. And there's two particular areas that like really got me with the silence. And one was the torture of Bix with these sounds that we didn't get to hear. I had a moment where we're like, are we gonna hear this wailing sound and all of us ourselves like be locked into a depression? Is this Disney's Endgame? Is this how they got us? Or is kind of a thing. But the how they like, we didn't hear it at all. It was completely left up to our imaginations of how horrific this sonic warfare torture device could be. I mean, we have these things in real life. They're called LRADs, long-range acoustic devices, and it's meant for torture in a way, right? And so it's interesting that it was localized like that. Also, in songs and harsh sounds have been used in the past on headphones for it was a really interesting mirror of some real life events that have happened in world history. And then the other moment of silence that I loved is the continuing lack of a score between Cyril and his mother. Every shot's the same. They're at the dinner table. Every setting is silent, and you just, the tension, you know what I mean? It's like you don't need anything in there. Their actions, their words, and just their emotions on the screen, like, is kind of score enough that you know exactly what's going. It's just so interesting that section. Almost, and I'll have to go check the other episodes, but I feel like every time we're in that setting, there's no music. It's just them at that same angle, at that what is it, kitchen table, dinner, like living room table, kitchen table kind of a thing, eating blueberries. I think is, now that October's over, they got all the blueberries. But
I think they are silent there. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But these were definitely two moments that really, really stood out to me. Just from a sound design perspective, just the absence of sound can be so powerful.
Yeah. And we heard more of the prison ASMR as well. And overall, just like some really detailed sound stuff happening. I mean, one of them was when they were pumping, when the doctor or the medical guy was pumping him with the drug. Yeah, you could hear the. It was pretty chilling. It was pretty sad, actually.
Yeah, that whole moment was sad. Anytime that we've been in that like tube, that line tube of where they're switching out the two shifts, kinds of a thing, has been interesting.
Wait, is that what the tube is?
I think that's what they're doing. They're switching out shifts from day shift to night shift.
They go.
That's why they're going in different directions.
Yeah.
Oh, because they all work in the same facility, or they all work on the same ground.
I think so.
Oh.
Yeah, the day shift and night shift share the same room. They just switch.
But they're on the same platform. But they're on the same level.
Yeah,
that's why he said it was 7D. Remember, he was like, D stands for day shift.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's our group.
Yeah.
So the ones communicating, so the people communicating with each other, that's just day shift and night shift. Same level, though.
I think they're just communicating. Yeah,
okay.
I think that's what they're doing.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize why they were doing that. Okay. Jonah says it has two versions of the Niamo song, Galaxy Mix and Coruscant Lounge Mix. That makes sense, since Nicholas Patel has now said that it's supposed to be a song that is present throughout the galaxy. It's like a hit.
That's cool. I like that.
There should be a Max Rebo mix.
Great.
Most important Star Wars character.
That would be so funny if Max Rebo shows up in this. That would be probably one of the most surprising things that could happen.
But
I really like the implications of like genre in the galaxy, where it's like we generally think that like swing jazz is like a precedent or like precedes like club music, but apparently like but then apparently we've got like straight up like modern like club house music that's happening like chronologically before like the group on the Cantina and Tatooine is like playing like straight swing jazz with like
Oh,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
you know, and
Yeah.
like steel drums. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like that, the idea of like genre. I'm curious of like the history. I mean, I guess when you've got a galaxy where there's like many, it's just I can't imagine. Like I'm sure that the field of like ethnomusicology, like in the Star Wars galaxy, is like one of the most like like rich like fields of study like
Yeah, right.
ever.
And
Because
and
of
if
just
and if we count, you know, Visions as canon, like it is in my head, um, we have Starwaver on Tatooine playing in front of Jabba the Hutt, who also
Right.
I'm sure is listening to, you know, is also listening to Max Rebo in his private
Right.
lounge. So
pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
That's funny.
Well, I think the fact that like all of it has been, or I think the fact that when we heard the Cantina music in A New Hope, it still at that time was anachronistic. So I think that's one thing that can make it all still work. Is even today here there are people who there are contexts where you would really do a throwback Benny Goodman type thing, you know, in
Yeah.
fully in or even like try to do a Baroque thing, like. So I think like people of the future draw from the past, and sometimes even like the future can sometimes encompass the past and draw from the past.
Totally,
Sometimes
totally.
yeah. So yeah, I do like the idea of these different genres though, and I can't wait to listen to the soundtrack.
yeah, so.
Yeah, it'll be nice.
Isn't it cool like that the show is so long that we're on volume 2 of the soundtrack and the show's not over? Like usually volume 2 is like the second half of the series for all these shows, you know, but the show has got so many episodes that like we're going to have however many volumes each season. It's pretty cool.
You
Yeah.
remember when Mandalorian
exciting
was
to
doing one per episode? At first,
Yes.
that was a lot.
Yeah, The Mandalorian was a little self-obsessive with its theme. Yeah, it was definitely like
Yep, that's true.
we're here.
Have you seen Boba Fett? Because I got one to one up that.
Yes. um, Justin, I like that you were talking about the absence of sound. So that was actually one of the things that I took down, kind of like two categories of things that I was looking at. That was definitely one of my categories, was moments when for absence of context or of content or sound is what is the directorial choice of that moment. And it was at the most horrifying moments. So it was Bix when she was being tortured. I totally forgot to write down Cyril and his mother. That's like the classic torture of Andor. Like, for sure, one of the most torturous things is like the two of them at the table. It does get worse than that, but in some ways it doesn't get worse than that. And then a little one, really quick, but when the losing team in Narkina 5, when they were getting electrocuted, the only way that we knew they were getting electrocuted was just from this a slight change in their breathing, and they weren't even in focus in the camera. Like, you basically could just kind of, you were like, oh yeah, like it was definitely a little bit in the background. It was kind of interesting, and I thought that was interesting. And relating to the breathing with Bix, it wasn't that. So yes, there was silence in terms of soundtrack, but the only content we got was her breathing, about how, and her. Well, I guess the only sonic content we had was her breathing, and then our visual content was her face, being clearly horrified.
Yeah, and screaming.
And then the same thing when Olaf died. No sound, just breathing. It was like, that's how you knew that he was dying, was the kind of like
Yeah.
situation. So
Yeah.
so I breathing.
That's other than I'd say, I think this, other than maybe like Last Jedi during Holdo's
Maneuver.
Holdo's sacrifice, Um, I'd say that this is like the only time, and maybe I mean, I actually I should go back and watch Xanthe's episode about that moment. But other than that moment, is there any other time you can think of in Star Wars in which they've deliberately withheld diegetic sound from us, and like in order for the audience to kind of imagine what's happening, like like, and I'm like you said, Justin, I'm glad that they did like withhold that from us, because I was like, in some way that's way more effective, because the audience just imagines the most horrible like depiction of pain and in their brains, and they don't have to like there's nothing that they could put on screen that could like equal that for every viewer, right? Like
Right.
they,
Right.
so
I mean,
that they don't
yeah.
have, the sound designer doesn't like, in some ways doesn't have to attain that. They can just like say, I put silence there and the audience fills it in for me. Which is brilliant, right? I mean, like, cause did everybody have like a very maybe not clear, but just like, did everybody start to kind of hear it in their heads when they saw that scene? Like, did you like maybe not exactly, but was everybody kind of like
What were the
at least imagining it?
The choral
I was.
what were
agonized
the
pleading.
clues that they
Definitely was.
did give us? They said somehow coral,
It said choral agonized
um,
pleading.
Right.
coral
It's
agonized
pretty
pleading.
descriptive.
Yeah, it
And
was
then
like
And then they
specifically
also
what
said
they
the
that you
sound
can
of people dying with lots of babies crying.
Yeah, which is awful.
yeah
But did like
yeah.
they said
go?
they said that we specifically found a section that we think are children, like primarily children.
Right.
Ugh.
And I like
But
that
yeah,
they
I mean,
said that we think our children, because that also implies that sonically they could tell,
Hmm.
because it's an audio recording, not a video
Yeah,
recording,
that's
correct? So,
Yeah.
right.
that was wild.
And
Oh,
also
so
the
that
fact that
that
they
is
think it's
wild.
children makes me think that maybe it's a species that is not very similar to humans. So they're perhaps not quite sure, but like they think.
Yeah. But
also
whatever
it's
it
a
is,
species
it's
that they
like,
were okay. It's a species that they were okay having en masse. I can't believe the word genocide. Sorry, yeah, genocide. They killed all of them. So that also means that from the Empire's point of view, it was definitely a non-humanoid species, because they felt totally okay. Like, think of Geonosis and other situations where there's like a bug-like species or
Mm-hmm.
something like that
yeah,
that typically do have really interesting
Sounds.
intonation methods. It could have been something like that. That's kind of where my mind went, was a species that has like a very interesting vocal chamber shape,
Yeah.
and then somehow naturally intones lots of different pitches all at the same time. So they're
Yeah.
but then I also, so the other question I thought of was, is, sorry, I seem a little too excited about it. Kind of like the
No,
torturer
no.
was a little too excited to employ his torturing. He was so scary.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That
but
was me last
so
week,
I was
getting
wondering,
excited about torture.
yeah, that's a good point. The When they say choral, the kind of first thought that I was thinking was, okay, do they mean choral within one individual's intonations, or do they mean choral in that perhaps it's a hive community that somehow is able
Mm.
to like time their screams so that they have a literal choral situation where it's
Mm,
um, where all of them together are somehow like, I could even picture a species that has an actual death song, something that's like, I don't know, like something that they sing
Mm-hmm.
for the dead, and everyone kind of doing that at the same time, or it, it occurred to me that it could be something like that, but I still think it was a creature that each one of them has a really rich diversity of pitches in there,
yeah,
and I hold my hand like this because if you're thinking vocally, like you're gonna need like kind of like a taller, more interestingly shaped space than a human throat and mouth to make that happen. That's
So the use of the
That's
word
what I
choral is, I
Interesting.
think, what's sort of interesting here because we don't know how, like, we don't know how colloquially or like specifically Dedra was using it because choral could be just like, it sounds because there's a lot of people or there's a lot of creatures making these
Huh.
sounds. The concoction is sort of choral, like, and it could be like a qualifying or it could be like a descriptive because to her, even though it is like a torturous sound, she is gaining pleasure from this because she's not listening to it. But Dedra's gaining pleasure from making Bix listen to this. So I can see for her it being like it's almost like a nice treat, like a nice choral, something something.
Or she could
Oh,
mean
that's
it
great.
Coral, so maybe it sounds like a marine invertebrate.
There we
It
go.
could have been the great coral reef creatures, all their
Oh,
Yeah.
subsonic cries.
you know what this you know what this reminds me of, and I just had I just had to look this up. There's this tradition around the world, and there's like different ways of like naming it and expressing it, but it's called keening, and from Ireland, the Irish tradition of keening, and it's a type of
Keening.
lamentation. Yeah, Keening. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong because traditional Gaelic and Irish have very interesting pronunciations, but it's a type of like lamenting, wailing type of song that's used not specifically keening like the Irish tradition, but there's so many examples from around the world of like lamentation of death songs that feature like perhaps less pleasant singing. Maybe pleasant is not the right word here, but
You're pleasing,
sing song,
like
pleasing sing song singing in a way.
yeah, kind of like how we've
More.
got. Oh, so sorry.
Oh no. I was going to do the same thing. It was just more of an expression, a vocal expression, kind of a thing.
Totally. It makes me think of the difference between like when I think of. I like that you use the word lamentation. It's kind of one of my favorite words sometimes because it's so clear what it like. It's a really descriptive word, and I think of something like Mozart's Requiem, where technically
Mm,
it's really pretty. Like a lot of our lamentation music is still meant to please and entertain, even if
mm-hmm,
it's in a like, oh, we're all going to be kind of sad together, but we're not literally uncomfortable and unsettled together. And so I'm very interested to research the keening because I love when a little bit more grit and reality is brought into something like that, where it's like, this is a lamentation. Maybe there can be something genuinely unpleasant and discomforting about it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, so these are from Wikipedia.
Is that a lamenter?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
A woman keening at a wake in at a wake, County Kerry. In County Kerry, I don't know, in the
Must
early
be.
19th
I think,
century.
yeah.
Yeah, depicted from the memories of Samuel Carter Hall. She had black, uncombed locks and a blue cloak, and held her hands above her body, then dramatically waved them in the air as if by sudden inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And as a verb, keen as a noun or verb comes from the Irish and Scottish Gaelic term to cry, to weep, as well as another word that means gentleness, pleasantness, and beauty.
Totally.
So there is like a, yeah,
Can I comment on your woman keening for a minute?
yes. I wouldn't call it
That
mine,
that
but
this is
I don't think I'm not associated with it.
so
That's a good drawing, Xanthe. Well done.
Good, nice.
uh, making a point to remove association. I'm going to bring up our favorite character, Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Thank
So
you.
one of the number one things that one of the number one
Every
things
episode, Theron's got to appear.
I know. I promise I don't plan it, nor do I have a. Well, I'm surely predisposed to try.
Yeah.
But one of the number one things that Thrawn is always talking about is that whenever you hear a story about someone else,
Mm.
it really, rather than telling about that person, the subject, it's really what. Okay, I'm just, instead of
It
saying what
says
Thrawn
more.
says, I'm just going to say it about this. So what I think Thrawn would say about this woman in the wake is he would notice that it's rather than us learning very much about that woman, we learn about the person observing her.
Yes.
This person chose to mostly note about that she was a woman, where
Hmm.
she was, that she had black uncombed hair, a blue cloak, and held her hands above her body and dramatically waved it. So this person is definitely like more interested in the visual effect of
Hmm.
her. And I also feel like if she was making some sort of amazing, sort of scary sonic situation, it'd be nice if this person would have described it. And they just kind of discounted that. And they were like, let's talk about her hair. Let's talk about her clothes. Let's make a point to say that she had uncombed locks. It's a little bit,
Hmm.
basically, I'm kind of seeing like the male observer of like not that, not to diss y'all males, but but the ones at the like it's got kind of like a colonizer vibe of like
Yeah.
some
Black
people
uncombed locks. Yeah.
Hmm.
went to observe these people, and instead of like empathetically observing the people, they were like, yep, she's got like uncombed hair, so we're gonna like feed into the whole like these people are barbarians myth. She's like waving her hands, sudden inspiration, rather than saying something like the moving sounds coming from her voice are chilling me to the bone.
Hmm.
uh
Yeah.
I just, so yeah,
Mm.
that's kind of the thing, is that this screenshot that you happen to find, Xanthe, just makes me think more of the person who observed all that happening than the actual keening itself, which is interesting
Yep. I
It
couldn't
is
agree
and
more.
interesting.
allows me to bring up
It's
Thrawn.
yeah, it's pretty interesting that Xanthe chose to describe this person like that. You know.
Wow,
You're the worst.
jeez.
Luckily, it says, from the memories of Samuel Carter Hall. Thank you
That's
very
true.
much. Who was
Yes.
an Irish-born Victorian journalist who is best known for his editorship of the Art Journal and his much satirized. Oh, and for his much satirized personality. Yeah, okay. That will be a deep dive for later, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
so, Christina sent me this video, and I'm just gonna maybe play a small portion of it because I checked. There's no like music in it, unless this audio is copy is like listed as a piece of
Oh,
music. So
that's
I'm
what
Yeah,
it
just
yeah.
is.
So
Yeah.
I'll just play a little bit
play
just
it,
in case. Yeah.
but before you play it, I'll tell you a little bit about what it is.
Okay.
It's an instrument that a lot of indigenous communities in the southern part of the American continents that they use, and I was just at a at a jam session the other day with like a bunch of people and playing like what we'll call normal music, and then someone brought some of these instruments, and it was the most priceless addition to a jam session, and you'll see why, because when I was talking about the shape of a species' vocal tract earlier, what this instrument does is it is a wind instrument that tries to sound like a screaming skull of death. And and it has a hole at the bottom so that you use your hand to kind of manipulate the pitch. And then you can use your mouth as you're blowing into the little tube at the top to do various intonation things, and so I just wanted to say that. So I'm pretty sure what this person did was just take a bunch of those and make like a like a scariest
Like
sound
a
you'll ever
choral.
hear track, which is cool. A choral. Oh my gosh, it is an example of a loose choral experience.
Okay. Are we
So
ready?
I just wanted to say that when I thought about the most horrifying sounds, would be that.
Okay. Let's hear. Okay. Do I have to start at the beginning, do you think? I might as well.
I think 3 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, it
Christina has a
definitely ramps
part.
up.
Christina has a section. Okay. Okay. This is Christina's whistle. Okay, so those high pitched screams are
Oh
coming from
my
that
God.
from one of those.
Yeah,
They're all
death
coming.
whistles.
Whoa.
All those, that whole pitch profile comes from like, there's probably only like one or two blows happening right there. So like one or two of the instrument being played. It's, yeah,
It does all of that at the same time.
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's a lot of them playing. I know that they're
Whoa.
very special to
That's
Aztec,
really intense.
Aztec
Really?
culture and Aztec history.
Oh,
Wow.
They're so cool.
Wow. I wonder what
And
they
it's
were
funny,
used for.
Christina, that you just went to a jam session that featured one of these, or someone brought one. A very
Yeah, so
recent
now you
gig
can
that I did.
understand.
I
Oh,
was just gonna say
you did a gig?
a very recent gig I did. I actually had to amplify one of these things.
Sorry.
It was great.
Really?
One person, but it was
exciting.
I actually had to amplify it.
Wow.
It was wonderful.
How amazing
Nice.
is that?
Martine has some. That's who Martine. So we were playing some like
Ah.
Colombian traditional music, and they just came in at the downbeat of every phrase with this, and it was like it was
Wow.
really fun to play. It kind of turned like a kind of acoustic, homey feeling songs into like kind of like metal music all by itself.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an
It was
Whoa,
so
example.
dude.
cool. So
New Andor theory. Well, what if
yeah.
that species that was quote unquote wiped out, what if they were all playing some sort of death whistle and that's what they sound that they recorded? They survived, but they were playing their death whistle.
That's great.
I love it.
I love a
canon now.
positive take on a bad situation.
It's canon now.
A self-preservation tale. They will come back and join the rebellion. Okay, well, that was an interesting little diversion. Thank you for
And-
that, everyone.
Yeah.
Justin, any thoughts on the headphones, the torture headphones that they used? Did
Oh,
anyone,
God.
anyone, anyone notice any
Yeah,
any resemblance to any?
It looked
I
like
feel
a
like they kind of reminded me of
backwards
these,
VR
actually.
headset. Yeah. I think
Yeah, that's-
it was these or what you had. It looked like a backwards VR headset with what you're wearing.
Right? It's kind of interesting.
But it was interesting because they didn't go. Okay,
No,
we're gonna
please.
headphone nerd for a second here.
Yeah.
That they just kind of like went on her ears and not like over her ears.
Yes.
They didn't. I felt like they didn't like encapsulate her ears. Like,
Yeah.
as you can see with like my headphones,
And mine.
it covers
yeah.
my whole ear, but without touching my ears necessarily. But it felt like they were just like
Like
I don't know.
James's.
just kind of just on
Well, mine's
her
still kind of.
ear.
Oh no, you're
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Do that.
but-
okay.
Look at how ripped this.
But like
shirt is
even
by
without, but
headphones.
what I mean, like even without the kind of, But yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. I also thought it was funny, like watching that scene. I mean, not that that scene is funny, but the audio engineer, the Dr. Gorst, whatever his name was. I was like, it's like the evil version of me. Look, we found these cool sounds, and don't worry, I know this is going to be bad, but it's going to be okay. Try this. It sounds really crazy. It's like this is evil Justin. He's still nice, but but we're going to
I love
torture
that.
you. I'm a tech nerd, but we're still gonna.
So we have to find all the versions of the four of us in this show. So
Yes.
I
think that's
am.
me.
I guess I'm not maybe not the evil version, but I'm like the James. Found a steady percussion job dinging a what do you call it
One of the
a clock tower bell every twice a day.
Nice.
So I'm that guy.
Nice.
Justin's the
That's
evil
good.
sound engineer.
Evil sound.
I have no idea who I am.
I'll have to keep thinking about
Yeah.
that.
I see
Let
you
me
as
know if you're inspired by an idea.
a Mon Mothma type. I kind of.
You see me as a Mon Mothma type?
You're controlled. You got things, but then at the same time, you have care for your friends and the cause, and but then you have to. I don't know.
It's fascinating. You're like the painter of the wailing of the keening person.
no.
So
That's
those
like-
headphones, yeah, I feel like they're in line with that like 70s, 60s '70s aesthetic though. You know, like I
Yeah.
feel like I've seen pictures. I'm not a super like headphone junkie, but like I feel like I've seen like similar headphones in like pictures of like folks in the studio back in the 60s or 70s. I sent Xanthe some links to some other what I feel is like
Yeah.
similar in
It
aesthetic,
felt very Walkman, like
right?
almost Walkman like
Yeah.
old Walkman.
Like you see
Oh,
like
I see.
videos of
Yeah.
the like
Yeah.
the Beatles like in like Abbey Road Studios wearing headphones like that, you know?
Uh,
But
They used to
Justin,
call
what
them
you were
studio
saying,
cans
mhm.
because they look like cans on your ears. Studio
Right.
cans.
That has a really Star Wars look, like that
Doesn't it?
specific.
Yeah, because 70s. No, just
Yeah, yeah. Like Lando could easily have those on his ship for his private listening.
But Justin, were you saying that they were like more like on? You were saying they're on ear headphones, not like over the ear headphones, right?
That's what it looked like to me.
Okay,
I'd have
okay.
to like look again, but that's kind of what. But yeah, with that same backing though, James, that same like circle, just kind of rugged and not very
Yeah.
like, you know,
Like
the
would
look
it
I
isn't
feel
what
like
they're about. It's the
like would it did they look like the type of headphones that would have bled through?
probably in real
Yeah.
life. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
they didn't look like sound canceling.
That's one of the things that Dedra likes about it. She's like,
Because she can
I
hear a
get to
tiny
like
bit of
kind
it.
of hear just
Oh, it's so
like,
choral.
So fucked up.
That's her morning coffee music. It's
Holy
coffee
crap.
and lo-fi wailing. It's it's
Dear Lord. Um
her eyes do
I
water with excitement, like anime level. When
her
she's like
expressions
in
are
Check
so
out the
character.
good.
check out the 5 minute mark because that's when she gives the most evil smile. It's like the most I've ever seen her smile. I wrote it down at 5 minutes.
And her little sneer,
Dedra
her little
smile
lip.
at 5 minutes. That's what I wrote.
Oh,
Oh, she's like, I have you in my net or something. Oh, she is so excited. It is
Are you
Dedra.
a
This was
fish?
quite a Dedra.
Or just
Are you a fish or are you a thief?
yeah. In
Who
that
wants to be the
moment
fish?
where,
Who
I
wants
feel
to be the thief?
yeah, yeah,
That's what.
right.
That's who I am in Andor. I'm a thief.
You're a fish.
I'm a
I was gonna
fish.
say
Okay,
fish.
sure.
I
James,
feel
what were
like
you gonna
this
say?
headphone shot is gonna be the most memeable. Like you can just take that shot and put whatever like crappy music over that of her screaming, listening to it,
Yes.
right? You can make a million meme jokes of this, of like like
Totally.
Rick. You could do like Rick Roll, and she's just screaming, listening to Rick Astley,
Yeah.
Baby
Totally.
Shark is a good one.
Baby Shark, right? So if that hasn't already happened, it should.
All I want for Christmas is
Um,
you. Well, we better start doing it now before
you know, Poe Dameron saying somehow Palpatine has returned. Um,
I'm looking up Lobot's headset because I kind of want to know if it reminds.
Lobot had like it was like the reverse
oh yeah,
Star Trek.
Right. Because
that would be
this.
so messed up if Lobot's just listening to suffering on 24/7.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Because Bix's headset does have like that back strap too. I mean, obviously, it's different, but it does have that the security of the back.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah, that Bix scene.
Yeah.
For some reason, the
Who,
screaming surprised me. I think the screaming is probably. I don't know how I felt about it, to be honest.
About her screaming?
Yeah.
Like screaming?
Well, I didn't dislike it or like it, as one probably wouldn't like something like a torture scene, but
Uh-huh.
it raised questions about what she was hearing and made me wonder what the documented responses are of people being tortured by sound. Although I don't know if we have examples of people being tortured by sound in that same way. Because I think, Justin, the thing you brought up is more like it's isn't it torture because
Well,
it's so loud?
there's yeah the yeah the weapon itself and LRAD is just very focused, high decibel,
Right.
horrific tones kind of a thing. So
Right.
it
Like it
would
could
cause you
make it could
physical.
yeah permanently damage your
Right, but
ears.
then there's also been documented cases of psychological torture of like playing heavy metal music
Yeah.
at high volumes on repeat to torture someone
Yeah.
psychologically
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Or I think there's a documented case of like I think Welcome to the Jungle being used or something like
Yep.
that to bring somebody to like nothing to do with the music itself, but like using music that's like not um
Yeah.
yeah
what stands
I,
out to
I
me
lost my
there
words
is
here, but yeah.
the thing they had in common is repetition and the loudness.
Yeah, repetition
I
and
don't think it was.
harshness too.
Well, I was just gonna. So that was one of the things I was kind of excited about thinking. So, like, what are the literal qualities of sound that we would expect to hear in a torture thing? So you're saying like loudness, the repetition. I also think the pitch content probably matters quite a lot because of the way that when certain and I'm sure that y'all, we've talked about this concept on the show a couple times, but the concept of beating between pitches, how
Hmm.
there's uh, whenever you play certain pitches together and play them in someone's ears, they often can have a visceral response in the nervous system that is
Hmm.
very predictable. Um, there, there's like hilarious examples of this, like the South Park parody of the what is it called, the Elrod?
Is it the Elrod?
Is that the machine
Elrad.
that
LRAD.
LRAD, sorry.
El, El,
So like the South Park parody of the
LRAD.
LRAD was that they play it and everyone poops their pants and
The
then
brown note.
like
The brown
the
note.
brown note. Yeah, so there's like the brown note and they make like an entire town like suddenly not know what to do because they have involuntarily
Right.
and that's how
Um,
they like it's kind of like a heist thing, so like that's how they get away with like achieving something because everyone's distracted and can't like focus on
Right.
anything. But so yeah, I just wanted to but that's the thing, and it's used in a healing context a lot of times. Like if you go on the internet and you try to find like relaxing tones for healing,
Hmm.
like I'm not necessarily saying
423.
it does or doesn't.
Right.
Huh?
Right.
423 or whatever that
Hertz. Yeah. Yeah.
frequency
Yeah.
is. Everyone's on the 423
Yeah,
hertz.
yeah.
Also binaural.
Uh,
Xanthe and I were
Binaural
part of
beats.
a production at Red Cat last spring, in which there's some really interesting writings and hypotheses regarding the gong that actually I was playing and how it resonates with, you know, I'm sure. Actually, Xanthe, you probably know a little bit more about that than I did, since you've done a little bit of reading on that. But yeah, the gong being played was at a particular resonance within some type of solar astrological
Something. And
properties
they
or
were
something.
measuring
Yep.
brain stuff.
Yeah,
For
pretty
cortisol,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is makes sense, Christina, and thinking about it in terms of this. And so I guess what I'm saying is like it kind of grounds. We can work backwards, kind of, and almost construct what we think would have been elements of this recording, unless, and that's what, and this is why the fact that they left it up to our interpretation or like imagination is like all of those things we mentioned could be, it could be something with the pitches, affecting like her nervous system. It could be something with extreme loudness, but she screamed so soon. I don't think the repetition was I don't think it was the same thing as playing Welcome to the Jungle 1,000 times. This seemed pretty immediate. And then it could be all of those things or just a straight shot to the disturbing, like the disturbing context.
Yeah.
like that.
And that's where the
potentially-
sci-fi kind of comes in, right? It's like
Yeah. Right.
somehow this sound made her do that, right? Somehow something is going on with,
Yeah.
you know.
And the only things I
going
can
on?
think of, like in real life in the sense of our world, that would have that kind of effect on us is not just volume, but like incredibly high frequencies, incredibly high stuff. Like even if it's like not loud enough to make it hurt, hearing high pitched frequencies, like I'm talking like in the like 10K, 10,000 range and above. At a certain volume can just be like, oh my goodness, that is the worst thing, or just pure noise. And what I mean by noise, like white noise.
Yeah.
At a very loud volume can be very intense. But definitely, what came to mind in my internal ear when imagining this sound was not just a chorus of creatures, but like very high pitches, because that's what would do it for me personally.
Okay.
Like very high pitches.
For me, if you wanted to torture me, the sounds
Hold on, let me,
that do that for me are writing with a Sharpie. I cannot listen to it. I can't be in the same room as it, and it lingers with me for like a minute after it's done, with like how I can't explain what my visceral reaction is to that sound, that squeaking. Same thing with writing
Sharpies are squeaky?
Yeah.
There's a squeak.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a squeak.
There's a squeak.
yeah,
And
I
then
guess
same thing is, I don't know if you've ever walked in sand and your feet scuff into the sand and it makes that squeak sound when you kind of scuff your feet into sand on the beach. There's like times when I literally can't walk on the beach without like cringing because of the frequency. I'm really like can't do those sounds. And I'm like looking around and everybody's like walking fine. I'm like, is anyone else like being tortured by walking in this sand right now? It's kind of wild. So yeah, that would be me.
Yeah.
If it was just people that'd be funny if in this scene she's like these are the sound, or the guy is like, these are the sounds of someone writing with a Sharpie.
Yeah.
That's what would torture me for sure.
So
Yeah.
these are
So what clues were we given? I just wanted to kind of point out that the sound engineer actually did give some clues about. He said that they layered. Did you write it, Xanthe? You often like write exactly what was said down.
They did mention
Tragically.
layering, yeah.
The choral.
They mentioned layering. Did they say delay or something? Like I feel like they used like 2 or 3 specific words. They didn't like or augment.
Yeah,
they
did.
talked
I'm
about
pulling it up,
we reprocessed, we layered. It was something like that. Yeah. So they
At first I thought
Yeah.
you meant the sound designer for Andor, and I I was like, oh,
no, yeah.
you talked about it?
No.
Who is it? Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah,
Gorse
no.
or Gorse. or
Dr. Gorse, yeah.
Evil Justin.
Evil Justin, yeah.
Evil
Okay,
Justin.
okay. It's extremely... Okay, here are the hints. Here are the clues. Sentient species. Let's see. They make a sound as they
Agonized
die.
pleading.
A sort of choral, agonized pleading. There were 3 communications officers the morning monitoring the documentation. Okay, so it wasn't the death whistles. And they were found hours later huddled together in various states of emotional distress in a crawl space beneath the ship's bridge. We've taken the recordings and modified them slightly, layering, adjusting, whatever that means. And we found a section that we believe are primarily children, which has its own particular effect. And then...
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I'm laughing at the fact that such a like nerdy sound design description is like in Star Wars. It's like pretty wild.
Right? That's
It's
why
like,
I was like, oh my goodness. This
right?
is,
He's like, so we loaded them all into Ableton, and
Then we layer, yeah.
I put on this wicked tape delay, man. You're going to love it.
We split the high
it's like,
and low
yo,
frequencies.
what if Bix was like, are you like a more like Max MSP kind of person, or like
They loaded it
you
into
more like
Max.
Chuck?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. Did this whole thing in Chuck.
I did
It's
this
quite
whole
agonizing.
thing in Chuck.
That's some
I think it's
deep color
interesting-
humor there.
Yeah, that's true.
It is.
And for me, a big hint is how quickly it affects her. Like,
Yeah. I was wondering if she was like, well, we don't entirely know that because she
I'm
said
not
turn
sure
it
I
on, so we don't
believe.
know if there's like a silence in between in beforehand, and then she's like, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? And then it hits and she starts screaming. It could be immediate. Who knows?
what do you mean? Like on screen? Well,
Like on screen, they put the. I felt like that she was listening to silence for a little bit, like she didn't know what was about to happen,
mm-hmm.
and then like once it started happening, like the sound actually got into the headphones. Like it was pretty quick. I felt like. But
Yeah,
that was-
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Hmm.
But either way, it was
Yeah.
like within the first minute for sure. It was pretty.
Yeah.
And then Dedra says,
Oh, yeah.
doesn't take long. It won't feel that way to you inside, but and then it's repeat listenings that cause the most damage. And so I guess that kind of does, play to the repetitiveness. But I'm not. Again, that's so loaded. It could mean so many things. But I think Bix is clearly like psychologically affected by what she's listening to on a content level pretty quickly. And it also makes me wonder if without hearing without hearing the context of what it was, I wonder if the effect would have been as the same, like if she wasn't told what the
Huh.
sounds were.
It wouldn't have. For sure, the Empire
I don't think
tested and decided exactly what kind of intros are useful for
the
reps to
prompt.
use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely talked about that. Even the sound designer probably had like certain things that he's supposed to say or not say. And
Yeah.
even maybe like a script of the order that he's supposed to use. There's no way they didn't like. There was probably some poor prison like Narkina 5 or something where they tested
They A/B
this on
tested, yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
to get the basic parameters for the torture. So,
Well,
Wow.
they like
Sorry, A/B testing wasn't
staging.
the right word. It just
Oh,
tested.
yeah.
Just
I
testing
feel
is
like
what I
that
meant.
the Empire likes staging their entrances and their fear. Like, what was it the last episode where they're just like, no, leave her here. I want her. I want her to see
Yeah.
him.
And
And
then
then the
she.
moment he walks in, she's like, "What are you doing? Get her out!" You know, it's like this kind of staged,
Wow.
like kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like they really like we're gonna make you scared first,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. It's
you
possible
know,
that this sound isn't even of what he's describing.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
Like if he had said, this is a bunch of death whistles. You're listening to a
Right.
performance.
Right. So, I was gonna say, this kind of reminds me. I don't know if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
But there's that scene on the beginning of it where they go in and they are, I think, what are they? They're basically like shown. It's like a torture device in which they're shown like what is I don't totally remember, but essentially it's like they're shown their like existentially like meaningless place in the grand scheme of the universe, right? They're like shown how
Yes.
small they are in terms of the grand scheme of the universe, and it like drives them insane. But then they bring in this one character who is like somehow immune to like it is somehow is not bothered by this piece of information, and he like walks out completely fine, right? Because he's like not
Yes.
bothered by the fact that he's and that's what I'm curious, like who is immune to these sounds, I wonder, like what sociopath, like I'm wondering if Dedra put that on, if she would be
Right.
bothered by these
Palpatine.
sounds, yeah. Palpatine is probably like
This is
has that
this is
playing
his
in
sleep music.
right.
This is his jam,
This
man.
is his workout music.
That's right.
He and Vader are like partying, getting their drink on, like Tarkin, Granddaddy Tarkin's in there.
Grandpappy.
Grandpappy Tarkin.
Tarkin.
Grand
That's what I call him from now on.
No,
It's
they have-
disturbing. Yeah.
Don't they have Thrawn in the background playing the organ for them? That's
No.
what it is. They're-
No.
He wouldn't be
Thrown
able
out
to
of this.
handle it. He would cry.
Thrawn wouldn't like it at all. Thrawn wouldn't like it. No. Okay, so the torture. Okay, the choral agonized pleading. Are you a fish or are you a thief? Okay, some other music stuff or some other music / sound stuff. Let's see. Oh, I guess just the fact that
I made
the backyard radio is also a crucial part of this plot as well. We have a new moon, Tasio Moon, which Vel had been to get the dress allegedly for Lita. And the
He's a
music,
little brat, I have to say.
Lita.
Yeah. I'm
I
sorry.
made a music note that. Oh, Lita. Yeah.
She's a teenager. I can relate.
I made a music note of two cues in the soundtrack where we get kind of the same thing happening. Like we had very little soundtrack during
Yeah.
this episode,
Yeah.
actually. Like, and the only places that I could find it were definitely transitional scenes, but they were both the same type of transition, as a matter of fact. They were at 1620 and at 3450. Oh, actually, they weren't actually at 1620. They were like at
1708.
1640.
Oh, okay.
But a really good sound at 1620, that's when Mon Mothma is making her speech to the senators. And she's starting to, she's clearly having a hard time of it. The sound of the senators' pods shutting off was really
Oh, I
good.
wrote
And
that
it
down
occurred to
too.
me,
Yes.
yeah, that's actually a design tactic on the part of the Empire slash even the Republic itself, that existed before, because that's what the senators do when they disagree with someone, is they
Yeah.
very loudly
Like,
turn their pod off and leave. And it's like, so then if you're making a speech and no one likes it, you definitely know. It's not like you just look out and realize no one's there. You literally hear this like, or actually, does anyone else have a better like vocal reenactment
I
of
liked
that
the
sound? Yeah.
Well, it's
But
like
yeah, and how it echoes in
Yeah.
that chamber too,
yeah.
Yeah, and that was purposeful on in terms of the plot point of the actual sound, the sound design, and that is when some orchestral sound started to come in, and and I don't know if it's a theme or a texture, but it was the same texture that comes when Mon Mothma is getting really sad about the situation in general, and I've noticed that it's the same one. So it basically from like 1620 to 1712, you can hear that orchestral, just like some strings that are
They sound like they're
kind of,
suspended in water or something. Suspended in air or something. They're very
yeah,
like
they're just
hovery. Suspended. Like
totally, and they're just moving between kind of like minor defined chords that are just kind of like sad minor 30 sounding things, or
yeah.
just intervals, and then crunchy kind of half step type things, and what they really do evoke is this building stagnant waiting dread that, just this, to me it is just this kind of like stifling, suspended dread, and it's, yeah, that basically I feel that, and it happens then right after her speech, and then it also happens at 34 minutes and 50 seconds in, when Mon Mothma is talking to her good old friend, Ty, and he's telling her that they're gonna have
Tay.
to ask Davos Skulden for
Yes.
help. And I think it was the same music cue both times,
Yeah. So okay. So
or
Mon Mothma.
really similar.
Yeah, Mon Mothma does have a theme, basically. I mean, yeah, it is a theme, and it is sort of this like. Did you just close your pod, Justin?
No, I dropped my water
That was
bottle.
good.
Justin just turned
That's
his
what it
pod
was
off
like.
on me.
Oh no.
I disagree.
Yeah, that was good.
No, she doesn't have a theme. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
thought
like-
it was interesting that they played Davos Skulden's theme at this moment.
Did they?
So that was a real not a good rendition, but it's like
That's Mon Mothma?
It's like a descending thing, but the chords, I understand. In the Senate scene, we didn't hear the actual descending. It goes like it does that like harmonic minor thing. It's some noodling stuff. Yeah.
I like that you called it noodling.
Yeah, noodly stuff.
Noodling is that's totally her vibe as a senator. Like that's what she like tries
She noodles.
to exude is that she
Yeah,
just kind of noodles, and that's how she's able to secretly always be supporting the rebellion with
right.
still
Yeah.
being a noodly,
And s-
Yeah.
unserious senator.
and so we often hear that
And
when
I
she's
don't think it's a
making her exit.
coincidence that we saw that guy eating noodles in that second episode of Andor.
Damn right. Blue noodles, blue chow mein. What I love about Mon Mothma's music is that it's like, at least to my ears, probably the most classical sounding of all the things
Really?
happening here. Mostly because when I hear there's a cadence at the end when she's speaking to Vel at the end and they're going away, when they're at the dinner table, when they're having the argument in an early episode at the table, and things like that. There's like a distinct and I'm not the best at theory, but like there's a distinct classical cadence that happens with the strings. It's like a very like minor mode of like 1-5-4-1 kind of like it's something along that lines.
Totally.
Um, and I always found that interesting because she is
One minor
kind
five,
of this.
minor 4-1, or do you have a
I
timestamp?
I haven't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just the
When
vibe.
she's the vibe, especially when she's talking to Vel,
Okay.
we're all and she's about to send her off. I think it's around.
Yeah, they say goodbye at probably at 30 minutes. They say goodbye.
At 30 minutes, and there's this nice, and I hear the same cadence a bunch anytime she's on. We get the strings.
Oh yeah, it's Mon Mothma seems. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, Justin. I'm even just listening to Mon Mothma's track on the Spotify, like on the album, the one that's titled Mon Mothma. I would definitely say that sounds the most classical out of everything, you know?
Yeah, and I like that they added that for her because she's still like classical music. Western classical music definitely has this high class society thing.
Yeah.
That kind of circles it, and with her being high class society senator kind of a thing, it feels very appropriate for her without it being like, and here's the harpsichord. You know what I mean? Which can happen and when representing a lot of those characters on screen. It's like, here's the string quartet. Here's the organ. Here's the Bach. Here's the Mozart kind of a thing. So it's like tying into that feeling, and really just the only association you get with it is not just the strings, but really that ending cadence kind of thing. The cadence
Yeah,
being
we're
like
hearing sort of
that.
this
Yep.
type
Yep.
of thing.
Exactly.
I feel like that's interesting. I wouldn't have characterized Mon Mothma's theme as sounding particularly classical, but I guess when you put it like that, I can sort of hear it. But I think throughout, I think it's a Nicholas Britell style thing. Like he has certain cadences and suspensions that he likes, and
Yeah, and we take all these things from those, historical pieces, and we reinterpret them, and we find different things. But then we draw back. I feel like as composers, and especially as film composers, we go back and try and like look at these music tropes, these cadence tropes, these sound design tropes, or whatever, and find ways to insert them to like have us like, oh, we feel this way because we heard this kind of a thing.
are you saying that
obviously,
it's intentional?
I think it was intentional. I think it was like, I think it's intentional that he used those sounds and those cadences and those chords like that to represent Mon Mothma for her being this kind of high class figure.
Okay, yeah. See, for me, Mon Mothma's sounds, which are sort of like the chords, they do a minor thing and then they do like a uppercase 5 thing, where they have like sort of leading tone action, and then it's always like that type of thing. Like for me, in the context of when we normally hear it, it doesn't ring as classical to me at all. I mean, no, it does ring as classical to me, but the number one thing it makes me think of is like espionage, Like it makes me think like of the it makes me think of the like secrets and the sort of like
Hmm.
what she's hiding and the little peak of danger there and almost excitement as well. But like, and I maybe it's because I associate her theme mostly with whenever she's in the car taking off from Luthen's shop or something.
Yeah.
We often hear it when she's like making an exit.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, in the context of at her home, and thank you for the comment, Pedrag. The track when Mon Mothma is walking her cousin out of the house is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
There we do hear it in strings, so it does bring in more of those classical vibes. You know, more of the yeah. So I hear it there more than usual. Mon Mothma.
Yeah. And I want to comment also on all what our comment here says. Also, the end credits track was excellent. I with
Yeah.
the piano and the strings. I associated that in my mind, and I think in an early episode of this series, with Bix, particularly.
The piano.
Like to me, like I noticed that theme when Bix and Andor were talking. I remember writing a note saying, "Oh, it's the love theme," like as a joke, kind of a thing. But like, I feel like that tone, those chords, and like that melody comes in when Bix is around. So to have that appear as the end credits after such an intense episode, I was like kind of depressed. I was like, "Aw, Bix," because it's such a
Yeah.
nice theme. But that's in my musical headcanon, and that's associated with Bix. But
For sure.
it feels like it is, at least in
I
the
get
earlier episodes.
back to the classical Mon Mothma yes or no
mhm.
kind of feeling. I get kind of Samuel Barber vibes from
get
her
that.
Mm-hmm.
from her
I feel
track.
that. I feel that. I feel
You
that.
know, Adagio
That's a
for
great composer to
strings.
have brought up, I
A
think.
little bit, like because
Yeah.
of the suspensions and the strings, a little bit. But I mean, the
Yeah,
same
so I
could be
think
said for
that's
Luthen.
where it hits for me is like that era of
Hmm.
classical romantic music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just doesn't, because of the context of the music, we're not able to get those like kind of Elgarish, like sweeping, beautiful things because these characters don't get to do that. They're in
Mhm.
like complete lockdown at all times, playing their roles so that they don't get killed and everyone they know gets killed. Like it's really high stakes. Um, yeah, so I just think that's why it can kind of be romantic, but also without that romanticism. Um,
Yeah,
It was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
plaintive, like, and I combined with the shot of her, just in her
Plaintive.
doorway.
Ugh.
Hey, by the way,
So,
on a separate note, Samuel Barber, Knoxville, summer of 1915, is
yeah.
a piece that has one single, uh, at least double P, if not 3P, triangle hit in it, and that's the only percussion part that it has in the whole piece. And it's like something like more than 100 bars into the middle of the piece.
Oh my god.
I love it.
And I had to play it. I had to play that in college, and to this day, I'm like 90% sure that I actually played the triangle hit. And there's a 10% of me that thinks I missed it,
Right.
like whiffed, like didn't hit the triangle.
Yeah. That's the
So
danger when
there
things
is
are
a
super
triangle.
soft.
That's right. There is a triangle connection to Daedra there. So.
Oh my gosh, that was quite a stretch.
By the way, I haven't heard the triangle reappear
No, we haven't.
since then. I think that was an early Daedra. I think
It was
she's had the
Dedra in the
triangle.
boardroom, ISB trying to rise through the ranks. Dedra.
She,
That's
she's
right.
it's,
That's like
she's gone from a mere triangle to a tubular bell now. She'll
that's right.
fully
She's
evolve into
gained.
a
Well, no. Have any of you read Flatland?
I like that.
She has. Okay.
flatland. Oh no.
Yeah. Okay. I was
I
gonna
am
say
not
she
a
has a
cat.
triangle that has gained an extra side, so now she is a square. In Flatland, the more sides, the more angles you have, the higher status you are. So like if you have a ton of angles and you're almost like a circle, you're
Oh.
like really high up. So
Wait, is,
Remember
wait,
that book?
a square is
Oh.
higher status than a triangle.
Like old school
remember this.
Flatland.
Flatland. It's a book about.
I feel like
It's a book about a it's a romance in 2 dimensions. It was written like 200 years ago or something.
yeah, I feel like I remember
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so what were we talking
Thank you,
about?
I am not a cat.
Yeah, chill cat. So the end credits music, that piano thing was sort of like, that felt super Nicholas Bertel to me.
It was beautiful.
Yes. Yes. It was kind of oscillating between like, oscillating between the chords, you know,
Hmm.
with like suspensions and what do you guys think? Yeah, it was a little bit. It was surprising, but like also not surprising. But I, to be honest, never made the connection between that music and Bix.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have
I
to.
think
I
I
didn't
think
either,
I
yeah.
I think it did it for me. Like I said, it appeared when she was specifically like when she was on screen in earlier episodes,
Okay.
in like the first three, kind of a thing. And definitely listening to it in this episode was like, for me, it was like, oh my goodness, that's how depressing. And hilariously enough, I did think, this would make a great lo-fi track. So to answer your question, I'm not a cat. Lo-fi's fun, and we need more of it. But
Um,
Yeah.
the
Um, Given that the way that Bix's theme was used in this episode, do you think that are there any predictions that you might make about, like, there was something kind of lingering about the way that they kind of like left her on the bed, and they made a
yeah,
point to even like show her like that one more time, like even though there really
Mhm.
wasn't a plot reason for that. So that makes me think that maybe she'll somehow like, it makes me hope that she will somehow recover from this and somehow like help someone in some way. Or it's, I guess it could be the other side of that coin rather than being like a positive takeaway. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of loss in this episode, one of which was Bix.
yeah,
I feel like Bix will recover, but
I think she'll recover.
I feel like the music, you know, I feel like it's more like deflating. Like she ended up giving away all that she knew.
You're right.
She
Mhm.
did end up buckling to the to the torture. So
Yeah.
she does probably not feel great about herself right now, about the situation. Like to be basically like have your mind ravaged and then like be forced to say stuff because you're in so much pain. Like that, the aftermath of that can't be good, and it probably is not going to be good for Andor, for Cassian either. So yeah, like physically speaking, I think Vix will be around, but mentally
yeah. I think
speaking, yeah. So whether or
Yeah.
not she'll like try to make up for it or something, I don't know. But
I think she will. I think she'll have what's the word? You know,
moment
her.
come back.
Come
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
I think oh, keep going, James.
Oh, I was just gonna mention like how different. I was thinking about the torture scene in Empire,
Yeah,
with Han Solo,
yeah,
which it has that kind of like funny moment when he gets out of there. He's been screaming, and then they're like, what's happening?" And he's like, "They didn't even ask me any questions." Remember
yeah,
that?
yes.
Which is like, I feel like,
Like I didn't
which
have
I
the
feel,
full experience.
you know what I mean? Like it's like there's such a different thing here. Like Han Solo, who could potentially offer so much information, just gets like sheer tortured by Vader and Empire, and Bix like gives them crucial information. So I'm very curious. I think we are for good reason, but we have like the actual details of torture withheld from us, like every time in Star Wars, right? And we got those parallel moments between Bix's torture and Princess Leia's torture in A
It's
New
true.
Hope, where they cut. Remember that they get that obvious callback
Yeah.
to the door going down, right?
Yeah.
And then the boots on the ground down the hallway, which is I always think that droid that has like a clear actual medical syringe on it is so
Yeah.
like, it's like, why did you need this floating orb to have a needle on it? Like what exactly about this? And that's the thing. It's like we don't know.
Because it
We
terrifies
don't get.
people.
Yeah,
Right, right,
I think
right.
yeah. So I'm just
For a
so
mo-
it's yeah. I mean, all of the there's mystery of what exactly goes on in the Imperial torture. I think the
Mm-hmm.
closest we've gotten is Kylo Ren and Rey. In some ways,
Mm.
where he's literally just we get to see him actually try to pry it out of him, and Poe,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? But usually it's like we don't get to, we're not privy to that info.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and Han Solo was fine,
Yeah.
whatever happened to Han Solo, he walked away and was cracking jokes after it. So
Right.
And he got
even
sparks and all sorts of things. I remember
whatever
it
kind
being
of things
like,
he got. So
yeah.
Ooh.
For a moment, I thought he was gonna in this episode of Andor, like the that droid with the needle was gonna come out. For a moment, I was like,
Right.
we're gonna have a moment, and then I'm happy they didn't. But
Right.
for a second there, I was like,
They
this
certainly
is where
could
we
have.
got the thing, Um,
Totally.
it's
I saw
like
a
the
parallel
dice.
here.
With what?
A parallel within the Andor show that is
Ooh.
happening. So right now, what's happening with Bix is she is theoretically, I don't know, gonna like escape or like look out the window or something and see that the Empire has like hung Pock, her friend whose backyard the radio is in, that he's gonna
Yeah.
be hung in like in is it called hung in effigy? Is that what you say? Like he's gonna be like hung as a symbol
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the probably the same, so here's the parallel, in the same town square where Andor's
Yeah.
adoptive father was
Mm-hmm.
hung. And then so that makes me think then of Pac's son, who we've seen several episode, like we've seen him a lot. He has, he was trying to find out like, what are you doing with my father? Where are you taking him? He is maybe gonna reconnect with Bix, and maybe the two of them are gonna do something useful.
Mm.
Um, or I just see that like Cassian basically, like that was a defining moment in Cassian's life where it defined like what kind of rebel or not rebel he is down to be. I think it also showed him when his adoptive father was killed like that. It showed him that anything you do, whether it's for or against the Empire, could result in your death. And so just like try to float under the radar. And I think that that's part of his personality. He like doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't keep up with the news. He tries, it's really hard for him to be convinced to actually do the Alderani heist. And even then, he
Yeah.
didn't stick with the rebels. He like straight up took his money and left. Um, and I just think that as that was a defining moment for Cassian, maybe it will be a defining moment for Pac's son.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully
Mm.
Pac's son
Is
will
that Brasso?
take it in a Brasso,
It's Brasso, right? That's his son?
Hoodie boy.
maybe.
Okay.
Boy with the soccer hoodie, right?
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. I
I
just
don't
think I hope
actually
that
don't know.
that
Brasso might be someone different. But anyway,
yeah. So
yeah. Okay. I see that parallel too then. Okay. For some reason, I have to admit, like, of all the storylines, the Bix one is the one I feel the least knowledgeable. Like, I feel like I
mm,
still don't know much about
Mm-hmm.
her and
Mm.
and what is her involvement has been and what yeah, I think I'm not as invested in her storyline as I am
Yeah.
any of the other characters, and I don't know
Well,
why, and it may
well,
be
we don't have
because
a reason of like why. We don't really have the backstory of like what caused her to be like
yeah,
to get involved with Luthen, to be like
Mm-hmm.
motivated to go
Mm-hmm.
back there and like and communicate over radio. Like what? How did she get involved with this whole thing, and why did she get involved with this whole thing? Like what was worth the risk for
yeah,
her, right? And we don't I don't know if maybe I'm mistaken, but we don't get to see a backstory in which she has some type of reason to put this stuff on the line other than money, I guess. Like I guess
That's
the
all Deidre
parts
was
that
saying,
she's
right?
right. Are you
Yeah,
food
that's
for a
what.
fish? Right. Yeah, yeah, James. Like I think also when she's being interrogated, not that we get to hear all of the questions or anything, but like it also makes me wonder, like, I don't even know what she knows. So like I don't quite know
Yeah.
exactly what information is at stake. Like when she says I don't know,
For
if she
sure.
were to say I don't know anything, I guess I would believe her, and I don't know if we're going to find out more later and it'll kind of dawn on us, or if maybe this is sort of just like a little bit of a hole in the story, perhaps. I'm not sure. Just yeah, the whole big stuff. I'm a little confused by.
Yeah.
Interesting thing about Marva, though. Well, Cassian trying to get out of prison, bittersweet, right? Because where is he safer at this point? I don't. Where is he safer
good
at this point?
point.
He's gonna get out of prison.
Hilariously,
and then,
the Empire doesn't even know that they actually have him imprisoned at the moment.
Right.
right. And the thing is, like, the Empire, they've been tapping Marva's line because they're like, for communication. And the thing is, like, right now, I know because Andor's in prison. Like, I know that right now her line is actually probably clean. He probably has not. He hasn't contacted her because he's been in prison. So like, that's almost like a relieving thing. Like, oh, Marva, as of now, has no reason to be suspicious because Cassian is indisposed. He's elsewhere. But yeah, when Cassian gets out of prison, that's going to open up a whole other kind of big worms.
Sure. Well, assumingly that I almost am wondering if the knowledge of where Cassian is from the Empire mixed with the potential escape are going to collide, and there's going to be some type of, that's kind of where I see this heading, right? Like that they're going to find out that he's there at the same time he's trying to break out, and then that's the culmination of those two story arcs. I think that might be the most effective, but we'll see how it plays out.
Chop 66 did ask a question, and it's one that I think about a lot. I know we talked about it last week as well. They don't have face scan intake for their prisons, and I feel like it makes perfect sense that they either they do have face scan but aren't utilizing their data like efficiently, or because I think this even happens, like this is happening all the time here in today on Earth, where there's so many data points, but it takes a lot of energy, power to make sense of data, to go through heaps and heaps of data. So it is actually believable to me that they would have, even if they did have face scans, that they haven't been able to make the connection yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many points in the OT where a face scan of like
That's true.
any of like Han Solo or any of them would have been like useful to the Empire, right? Like, but they don't utilize those types of technologies. So I think that the idea that the technology is limited but also is uneven across the board is like not hard to believe. And I think Cassian has an awesome speech that gives this title its namesake, right? Or this episode its namesake, right? Which is like nobody's listening, and he's like basically do you think they care? Do you think they actually care what we do? They're like, it's like the idea stands that the Empire still hasn't like understood that like all it would take is the right amount of momentum and the right cog in the machine to just like overthrow the whole thing. At the moment, they're so assured in their ability to control everything that they haven't realized that they haven't realized all the holes that they actually need to plug to make this all work. So
Yeah.
I like that point. Makes me think of drinking their own Kool-Aid too much. Like their propaganda that they need to tell all the citizens to keep the citizens in line, or not just in line, but like excited about them, is they tell everyone like, we've got it all under control. We keep the entire galaxy running smoothly. And so and obviously they don't entirely, and so it feels to me like they're kind of believing their own propaganda in that case. But at the same time, Lack. So the Empire definitely collects information. That's one of the key things that they do, but that doesn't mean that they care about processing it, except when it's
Yeah.
useful. So until an ISB agent goes, oh, can we do a face check scan of Cassian Andor for the whole galaxy, like with all
Mm.
Imperial connections? Until that happens, that information is not utilized. I could see that, and yeah, I was going somewhere else with that, but I forgot.
Plus, like we were talking about last week, like there is that hesitancy to, yeah, to admit when people need help in the Empire,
I
like
mean, they,
amongst the
yeah.
Empire, yeah, within the Empire.
Well, let's talk about this huge thing that happens at the end of the show, right, or at the end of the episode, and that's, I guess, maybe an example of this oversight. And maybe
Right.
like I think there is some like disagreement and a slightly like something that's a slightly unclear exactly what is the situation there, because okay,
What do
so
you
let's
think?
so what when I first watched it, I took it to mean that they that when somebody serves their sentence, they just recycle them back in to the prison. But seemingly that's a recipe for disaster, considering that person would just walk right in and tell everybody on the level, hey, I was just here and I can prove it. Here's all the things I know about this place, right? So I mean that's
Yeah.
a seemingly terrible idea, right? Like if you're gonna be like, okay, like so I feel like the best thing I can think of is that what they do is they actually have another. Okay, I'm wondering if there's two theories I have, that there's
Okay.
either another prison
Wait,
that
just
they
to
bring them
make
to.
sure we're on the same page, you're saying the recycling theory, you don't think it's as extreme as like literally they recycle all of them all the time, because you think it would have been strange that it hadn't come up sooner.
Right.
Okay,
And
yeah.
like this is like a seemingly big event. I understand. The medic just says like not anymore, like or not
Right.
now, not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not gonna get out now. And I think that's I think that's a result of that PORD order, right? It's just like nope, nobody's getting out at the moment because of the new rules, right? And this maybe this was the first person to have this happen to. However, what makes this all confusing is that the medic says like, oh, the Empire made a mistake. So I'm like, okay, if this isn't a mistake, if this is a mistake, and not just like, I'm trying to figure out how I should
Like,
read
what
that
was
line.
the
Is it,
mistake? Yeah.
yeah, what was the mistake? Because it seems like this is exactly what they planned on happening, or not. No, maybe not the having to kill an entire level of people planning on happening, but the person coming back in to the same. So my what I'm wondering is like, do they recycle them to a different prison somewhere, and that's what it is? But either way, someone's going to be like, hey, I just got out at another prison and I had to come right back here, or I had to come back into this prison. So I feel like this is the first time it's happened.
Maybe maybe their mistake was not sending them somewhere else. Where they just throw them in level
Yeah.
4 or whatever.
But you got to even
level
imagine
2.
if
Yeah.
they're going to another prison, wouldn't that person then say like, hey guys, I just
Never
got
had
here from a previous prison where we're.
I have a potential solution for you. There could be a level or a day shift that is specifically for recycled prisoners, and that's all that's there. So they all know it, and they still have to stay on program because they'll get electrocuted. And so it's possible that, like, say, level 1 is actually all recycled people, which there's not that many of, probably like at one given time, and they probably die a lot in there because they're getting electrocuted daily. Um,
Right.
yeah, so it's possible that maybe the mistake was just level 4 instead of level 1. It's possible.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, they just
did they have they? I feel like this didn't happen. They didn't describe one of the levels as being like not accessible, did they?
I don't think so.
I
Okay.
don't think so, no.
Okay,
Yeah,
maybe
the
I
top
don't.
66. I think we're sort of on the same page with you. Yeah, I do think
Yeah.
the implication is that the recycling is a direct result of PORD. Maybe they have a whole other prison with all the recycled sentences, which is what.
Right.
Yeah. It also, like another theory hypothesis would be that like once they get out, normally they're better at doing what Dedra was saying to do with that ship making it look like an accident. Like
Yeah.
maybe they're better at like people getting rearrested quickly, or just like going to a simulated, a recycled prison, an all recycled sentences prison makes more sense than what I was going to say, which was sort of more like a Truman Show situation where it's like, you're out. Here's your transition. Now you have a couple weeks of transition period, or you're just kind of like in another. You kind of go
Yeah,
up
well-
a pipeline straight to another imperial thing.
Yeah.
You're not
That
going
or-
to your home planet, but
Yeah.
like I think they're usually better at disguising what they're doing, so that people don't say, "Guess what? I just got out of prison," but they feel like, "Oh man, I got arrested again." Like it's almost like it could possibly have been their fault, or
I
something.
mean, we also have no clue whether or not they would have let him out in the first place. There's a good chance they just would have kicked him right into the and
Into the
yeah,
what?
you're out. Here's into the ocean,
Oh, right.
wherever
Into
kind
the
of thing. Where it's
whirlpool.
like, I'm out, guys. I'm out. It's like, okay, we'll take you there,
Walk
and then
the plank.
Like you're out.
basically, and you're out. We didn't say we were releasing you, but we didn't say we're going to take you anywhere.
Yeah. This brings me back to the moment when Cassian was originally sentenced, and they had the line of people going up to a stormtrooper who had a tablet, and he would say who he is, and then he would be assigned to his prison, and there were like 5 different options. And it occurs to me that Keith Girgo obviously has no family and friends, and is a person who could be murdered or killed, and no one would know or care. And so maybe everyone in this prison is someone who didn't have enough family and friends
How would
who would be asking about them, or like knowing anything about their sentence or something. Maybe they're all people who, if once they get out, they don't have anywhere to go, and it's really easy to either sabotage them or should just never let them out. It just occurred to me, like, what are the criteria that caused Keith Girgo to get sent to Narkina 5? Maybe it wasn't just that he's able-bodied, but also that he is someone easy to pick off of the herd.
Whoa. Yeah.
So, if we were to take a step back and think, okay, maybe the Empire doesn't want to. By the way, do we have any numbers on how big Narkina 5 is? Like how many people we think are there?
Wasn't there an exact math, right? Because there's 7
floors, 49 people per floor per room.
The
There's a
shift
day shift
is
and a
double,
night
so
shift.
49.
double shift.
Yeah. So
49
98
times 2
per
times
room.
7, right? 98 times 7.
Yeah, 98 times 7.
Okay.
Yeah, so 686 people.
Okay, that's a little fewer than I thought, but like, it's a little.
That's tiny.
Yeah, that is smaller than I expected, but like, I'm not so. I don't know why. I think it's possible that the Empire would still want to use their labor. They need a lot of laborers for their projects at the moment. And so it and they have been trained for years, some of them, in doing something, and they are, they know how to follow orders. This has been their boot camp. Like I still think there's like a chance that they are not necessarily imprisoning these. Like I don't think they would just kill off these labor-worthy.
Yeah, I don't think so. I
people.
think the whole idea
Waste
is that
resources.
they're saying
Yeah.
they're ensuring that they have, and I think the fact that they have this built-in enslaved workforce is a huge part of the Empire's ability to expand as much as we know that they end up doing. Is like they essentially
Maybe,
are just
yeah.
forcing people to make their crap for them. To make their exegol Star Destroyers.
Absolutely.
Wait, I think you have to account for rooms per floor, right? Did we do that?
I thought is there how many rooms per floor are there?
I assumed
I thought there was only
one,
just the one.
but
I guess not.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it's 7. Wasn't there? Maybe there's 7. I feel like there was like a 7 to the nth degree like thing.
we do
going
know.
on there.
Or something like that.
Yeah, what we do know is that per room, there's 686 prisoners. When you think of if every level has a room, that's 686. So if there's 2 rooms per floor, then that doubles. to about
Yeah.
1200.
Yeah.
So just for context, that like
Mm.
increases hugely if we double it. Uh,
Yeah.
I what was I about to say?
So
I'm just
sorry
reading.
to.
How many people at a
Never
time
base resources.
are imprisoned in Narkina 5?
Oh,
Yeah, okay,
and
so what Gary 24 fan, okay, they had to have fallen to the electrified floors, right? What do you mean fallen? Like literally, wait, maybe they have other execution methods there?
Oh, they just like fried them all.
That joint is bigger than what we think based on what we've seen, I think.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, right,
Yeah.
that's why
there
that number's so
were
smaller.
weren't there 5 holes? You know, when we first saw the planet and there were
Yeah,
those
the whirlpool
whirlpool
thingies.
things?
Yeah.
So it could be that each whirlpool thing is a set of 7 levels. So there could be 5 sets of 7
I mean, it literally
if there were
the place
actually
that they
five
are
whirlpools.
has a number on it, right? Narkina 5, right? So
Ah, the
True,
5
true.
whirlpools of Narkina.
Well, and there
Could be
were
the fifth
multiple
moon.
prisons out on that establishing shot, right? There were multiple prisons. They really got
yeah.
good use out of the tilting machine,
Yeah.
um, for
Yo,
the
who built
the
those
this this,
prisons?
this no the tilting for the spaceship tilt kind of a thing that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
mentioned in
Oh
like
yeah,
episode 3. They did that a couple of times.
like the
Um,
yaw turns.
Gotcha, Gary
yeah,
Whatever.
24 fan. Yeah, yeah, they killed them. But do you think it
Um,
was on purpose? And do you think
I think maybe that was the mistake. Maybe
were they meant
killing
to?
them all was the mistake.
Oh, I see. Where, yeah, because they do engage in light. They can
Yeah,
turn the floors on and off, but maybe they.
maybe that
Oh,
was the mistake.
there
Was killing them
are
all, so now they got to
there are
replace them all.
7 whirlpools. I'm looking at
You're
the
looking at the
scene from
picture?
episode 5.
7 rooms per level. Okay.
So there's 7.
Is
There's
there a
7
Sith
of the.
significance of 7?
Yeah, pretty wild.
Prime
I don't
number.
know.
I don't know.
Crazy. Unfortunately, my friends, I need to sign off.
All right,
Okay.
Justin.
But I want to mention real quick, I think I got through almost all of my notes. Super awesome synth intro, awesome sad Bix credits, and that made me sad. Sound of the Senators shutting off their platforms was awesome. The power shutting down
Oh, yeah.
in the tube, that was such a cool
Mm.
sound. It had this like metal lurch kind of, it was almost like coming from like an animal, like it was alive for a moment. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Cool synth music for Nobody's Listening
Mm.
when he's giving that speech that we mentioned. It sounded very similar to the opening from the last episode. Uh, um, almost identical, but very similar synths. Probably the same instruments in a different arrangement, kind of thing. Silence setting with Mom and Cyril. Oh, but we did get a great slurping sound from Cyril, like ignoring his mom. Go.
Yes.
I thought that was wonderful. Music between Vel and Mon, very classical. We talked about that. Also, I just wanted to mention real quick, a theme in the show with the sound editing is, and I'm sure that you have all have noticed, but it's been driving me crazy in a way that now I can't stop noticing. Um, is ever since like the first episode we did, like the first 3 episodes, like every episode they do this, and I know this is a popular way to do things, but there's the transitions. A sound becomes another sound. This is like a very like technique
Yeah.
that they're using every episode multiple times. Like something in the kitchen of Cyril's mom's place becomes the machine in the transition. Like that's the crossover thing. The ship sound in the distance becomes Mon Mothma's car. There was one in the earlier episodes where they said, "Weren't you gonna take out all those metal parts?" Yeah, I'm on it. And as it feels like he's like moving junk, and then it's someone getting thrown into something. It's like, so everyone in chat and everyone who watches this, like, start noticing as much as I do, because it's like every scene become like the transition sound becomes the next sound in the scene, which is cool. And also, Art of Noise is awesome. Thank you, Gary 24 fan. Fantastic group of historical in the synth world and sampling world. Anyways, friends, thank you so much. I'll
Bye,
see you all soon.
Justin.
I just
See you next week.
Bye, Justin.
So the Chop 66,
Uh,
yes, it has been a different thingy thing every week, a different opening theme. And here we go. Okay. Yeah, so if you actually go on the soundtrack, or if you go to like Nicholas Bertel's Spotify page or whatever, wherever you're listening to stuff, you can see um, some of the opening themes have been released like as a single, and the opening themes are also on the albums.
Yeah.
So yeah, um,
Uh,
yeah.
Going to a really quick point, just to like wrap up really quickly what we were talking about right before Justin popped off was I just wanted to point out in terms of like where do the prisoners go that indentured servitude is a huge thing in the Empire. So if
Oh
they were
yeah.
to release the prisoners somewhere that the only reasonable option for them is indentured servitude, that would be a potential way to recycle their labor. Like, for example, if they were to drop them on Kessel,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of just understood that that would be kind of the only choice. So
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I think
yes.
the labor is going to be used, and I think indentured servitude is very, yeah, that sounds very up the Empire's alley. Justin is my new best friend. I haven't actually met. So scary. 24 fan.
Yeah.
With the Kraftwerk shout out. Yeah.
Yes, with the Kraftwerk shout out.
So we did hear more of the ISB
Mm.
theme ish, um, in the form of. So this was sort of like we're on her full time. When Dedra is talking about, or is in the ISB scene, of course, and they're talking about like what the plan is. So yeah, just that chord. But then it went on to a different ending, which I thought was interesting, and they did that like twice at least. Um, the ruthlessness of Dedra's. Oh my gosh, I actually thought this part was really funny. It was really messed up, but it was like actually I found Dedra very funny in this episode. Just the things that she gets glee out of. Again, not funny, but just I don't know. She's so well acted. It's hard not to enjoy her
She's great.
sometimes. Um, so okay, let's see. Partagas, whom I noticed has five blue, thingy things on his uniform. So he's high up. He's higher than her, but he's not like that high up in the grand scheme of the Empire. Um, he
In
has
terms
no.
of the ISB, he's really high up, though, right? Because they
Yeah.
get fewer squares than actual military generals.
Yes. Yes. He's high up. He's high up, and he acts like he's high up. But it's interesting to like take a step back when we don't normally get so involved in the ISB. We're normally talking about people even much higher. So yeah, I just wonder what would happen if like Tarkin walked in, or just like someone really high up walked in.
Grandpappy.
Um,
Right.
woo! Sorry if you heard that. I forgot to mute myself. I was trying to get my microphone to work. Okay, that's great. Never
I
supposed to be
thought you were
heard.
making this. I thought you were
That was
making the
supposed to be a
sound
siren
that
sound.
the joy that our
Dedra.
ISB agent makes when he and Grandpappy Tarkin are at the Christmas party every year. That's
So
probably
disturbing. Denise Goff. I don't know how to say her last name. Goff has sneakily become the star of this show. She is so
mhm,
fantastic. I can't even believe it. Okay, so
she
Partagas,
is.
this scene happens so quickly, and he they're like, we got a rebel pilot in custody, one of Anto Krieger's group. We don't think Krieger knows he's gone missing yet. Where's he heading? They'll count him missing soon. You know, we want Krieger like all of a sudden Dedra pipes up with, what if we foul the ship? An accident, something mechanical. Have the pilot found dead in the cockpit? What would happen? Like she says it so quickly where you're just like, what is inside of your brain, lady? Like,
She's pretty sadistic.
Yo, they had a class on that. There's no doubt that ISB training includes like a class on all the different ways that you can fake like
Right.
a target's death. And so like for sure she was like textbook
that makes
able to
sense.
bring that up. I that's my take on it.
No, it makes
I'm so
sense.
I'm so fascinated by the transition of the depiction of the government in Clone Wars. Like you don't get to see those types of like evil, sadistic conversations happening within the Republic during the Clone Wars, but somehow they transitioned. Like, who are these ghouls that they found to bring in to, like, you know what I mean? Like these are awful people that have taken place of, like, these seemingly admirable people that we saw in charge of the Republic Army during the Clone Wars, you know? Were they always kind of there, but they weren't, like, mainstream, and then they like, promoted them to mainstream? I guess Tarkin... Like, Tarkin was ruthless, but Tarkin wasn't, wasn't openly sadistic and awful in the Clone Wars, right? Like, we get to see him in a couple episodes in the Clone Wars show, and he's kind of a dick, but he's not like an evil Goebbels kind of guy, right? Like, yet.
I feel like
but now,
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, I guess you're right. We see him more.
you know what I mean?
more
Like, we
about
don't get to
that,
see these types of conversations happening
right.
Yeah.
in the Clone Wars with the Republic. But now they're, like, front and center of, like, within these government, like, you know, meetings and stuff, like, awful conversations happening. You know, there's just, like, a guy being like, they've got, like, guys that are, like, recording people screaming and using it as torture device. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like something has changed. You know, so I'm fascinated in that transition. You know,
Yeah.
Did it change, or has Palpatine been implementing quiet programs during the entire time that he was a senator? You know, just quietly being like, oh, you know what, let's just start a department of sound organization. And then,
right?
like,
Yeah.
and, you know, it sounds totally fine on the outside, but then it's actually, you know, like, and the ISB will oversee it, or, you know, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Right?
Yeah, and well, okay, so the Partagas is like the whole back and forth between it. Like it goes on, and right, she's like, an accident, something we can't. First of all, just what if we foul the ship is the classic line now. And he goes, they'd have to find it, but they'd tow it into Kafrene, and then, you know, she's like, she's like, if we did it quickly, staged it properly, let it drift into traffic, and then make it so, top priority, quickly and carefully, we leave no trace, excellent work. Just like the excellent work part, just got me. Yeah. Excellent work is like something she says to her aide as well. Yeah.
So we should, okay, while we're on Dedra, what do we think about the clearly what's the word? Creepy, but also, like, clearly, like, there's definitely, like, a romantic, not like who knows if it's between the two of them, but I guess there's definitely, like, clearly romantic intentions on Cyril's part, which were not explicitly present last episode, and we were kind of joking about that.
Do you think
At least I was. But, like,
do you think there's
Cyril
romantic intentions?
I think Cyril is clearly he's saying things like, I wait for you out here, I'm interested in. There's clearly, I think it's clear that what he's expressing is more than just professional admiration, like to Dedra.
Yeah, I think more than.
While I don't necessarily think it's specifically romantic, I think it's definitely, at the very least, he perceives Dedra as a hero. He also he thought that there was no one else in the Empire who cared as much as he did until he met Dedra. And then all the work that she's doing inspires him so greatly. And I feel like the moment, so I think the romanticism, not the romanticism, but the romantic feeling of it came in when Cyril makes this speech about how wonderful Dedra is, and you could see in her eyes the gleam of, like, oh my gosh, no one has ever, 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 like, affirmed how awesome I am this way. And she's like, she wants more of it. You could see in her eyes, she's just like, kind of amazed, taken aback by it. She, I mean, it lit her up for a minute, but of course she's still Dedra, so she, like, takes all of that still and is like, have you been stalking me? Like that's kind of like her takeaway.
Okay. I'm glad I'm not the one that had to say this take, because that's exactly how I read this whole scene too.
I read it that way as well.
I think it's a problematic, like, situation for sure, right? Is like, this guy is clearly a
oh yeah, about him. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's clearly invading her privacy, and, you know, like,
he's infatuated with her.
Yeah, but I think there is a level of, like, she's kind of into it.
Yeah,
So,
I think she's
so
kind of into something that he's giving her. I'm not
yeah,
sure
yeah,
if
yeah.
it translate. I'm not. I still don't think it's necessarily. I'm not clear on what all of their intentions are or
Uh-huh.
feelings. I do know that he is infatuated and feels sort of like also that he is one of her. So like he is seeing
Right.
her through
Hmm.
his on a pedestal, and seeing himself in her also kind of raises his own esteem as well. It's sort of like a it's kind of have you ever been talked to this way? It's creepy. um,
Wait, do you mean talked to the way that Cyril talked to Dedra, or
yeah.
talked to the way that Dedra talked to? Okay, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it shows that someone is super out of touch with reality and relations. I think being out of touch with reality is a weird phrase in the first place. I don't think that's a thing in a way, because I think everyone makes their own reality according to their own
Yeah,
perception.
out of touch with
But,
your own reality.
Yes.
and I would say out of touch with, like, I honestly think Dedra could, like, it's kind of like no matter what Dedra says, Cyril will still feel the exact same way that he feels. Um,
Yes.
so he's
Yes.
not
That's
actually
how these people
listening,
are.
like, so, like, he worships her, but he's not open to receiving any information from her except that would,
Confirmation.
so, like, he's gonna, like, no matter what she says, it's gonna come through the same way,
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the point where I think the point where the conversation, not that there was ever a good part of the conversation, but I think the part where perhaps it gets even worse, is when he says, "I I want what you want. I sense it. I know it." Where then he kind
Hmm.
of lays claim to like knowing what she wants, and
Yeah, yeah,
I'm the same as
exactly.
you. I sense it, and that is like that's where it crosses from like you inspire me, like you're so great, to like and I know you, like because
Yes.
I see you and I know it's like it's a parasocial relationship pretty much.
100%.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
And some part of it can be flattering, and I think she is flattered, but I think she nopes out by then.
for sure. For sure.
She
Um,
does,
Well,
but she also wants, I think she's also tempted to, she sees that she can toy with him, because she also is like so trained to see like what she can get out of individuals. So I also just feel like part of the reason she get that look in her eye, part of it is the look of a predator, like a snake or something, looking at like a mouse that has just been like, I promise, I'll stay by you until you eat me. Like, like that it just there was that element to it, I think, as well.
yeah, I
yeah.
guess I should say when I say she nopes out, I mean her
Oh.
whatever possible esteem she may have had of Cyril goes down there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But again, that
Yeah,
might be what
maybe.
makes him in some ways more appealing to her in some ways, that he becomes even more weak and less, you know what I mean?
Right, and I mean the way that he starts as well, or what he says
Right.
toward the beginning of the
Like
conversation too, which is, "I'd never lie to you."
yeah.
But I think
Like
this is
he's
like,
like absolutely not a threat to her. He is, if anything, just a useful tool for her.
see, but
Um,
I think there's a very blurry line here because, like, I guess this is how people can be put in situations that are like Cyril could be dangerous. Put it that way. Cyril could be dangerous to her personally, and because he's obsessed, he's on a mission, like he
yeah.
could go full vigilante. I'm gonna take stuff into my own hands. Like it could go to
Yes.
that place. It could.
Agreed.
And I think a lot of the time people, even we're just talking about like abusive relationships or whatever, can be drawn in by feeling seen in a way because it's never black and white, right? In a way, he is appreciating her more than she is usually outwardly appreciated. he's a little different. Like, he's a little bit different. But yeah, we don't know where he personally could go with this.
Right.
And yeah.
I have to say, as a writing choice of like where this is going, it's extremely interesting. Like
Yeah.
it's and surprising, you know what I mean? Like in some ways, like this dynamic is quite, yeah. It could lead into very unforeseen within the Star Wars universe, like situations. Like how often do we see this type of weird dynamic that we're describing? You know, not often.
Like, he is being very creepy.
He is.
Just being in your presence, I've
awful.
realized that life is worth living.
Yeah, it's
I
awful.
realized that if nothing else, there was justice and beauty in the galaxy, and if I just keep going, perhaps my deranged belief that there was something better fated for me in the future was a dream worth clinging to. And he's getting all Shakespearean with it too.
Yeah. Well, it's his
I
mom that
kind of
makes
love
him
it.
act this way, basically.
You kind of love it.
I kind of love it because I think the Empire, it suppresses all expression, and especially Cyril wants to express himself a lot, like, and so he does it in weird ways, like with his clothes and his collar. But this, he has just told us like all of his top values in life, like everything that he cares about the most, and it also confirms that he really cares about beauty,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of other capital R romantic things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
Um,
think that's why Dedra
and
kind of is, I think a part of Dedra likes it too, because it's not
yeah.
only that someone is recognizing her, it's that someone is being so effusive, because even if her superiors and her coworkers recognize that she's a badass, they're not going to tell her like this. And so it's unusual.
No.
They would be fired immediately and sent to Narkina 5. Um, yeah, that's not. Yeah, the ISB has no room for anything that isn't just efficient, chilling,
Mm-hmm.
cold interaction.
And so interestingly,
Uh,
Dedra, who tends to be impenetrable, like this could be one thing that kind of confuses her enough. Like, I feel like of all the threats to Dedra, and I don't mean it, threats you can interpret anyway. Like, it could be just like knocking her off her game or something. Like, I feel like
Or
this,
fucking up her whole plan, everything.
exactly.
Like he could be. I mean, you saw how
Seriously.
sloppy he was on Ferrex. You know, like
Right.
he could totally his incompetence could totally screw up everything for her. You know, so.
Yeah, I
But
feel
I
like
dearly,
Cyril is a potential threat to Dedra.
yeah, I really want to see him do something totally unacceptable and see her face watching him do it and just see like the amount of hate and contempt radiate through her eyes. Um, I can see
Especially if
him
it's
doing
something he
something
does for her.
horrible. Like, yeah, I think he would be like lock her in a room or something and be
Right.
like I'm protecting you. The
yeah,
Cassian's out there. I'm going to save you from him. And then she's not able to like coordinate the ISB team, and Cassian gets away, and Cyril is standing there. Like, that's kind of the vibe. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like I said, it could go to what looks like a dark place. The problem for Dedra with Cyril is that he is 100% committed. He has a very defined and rigid morality, and if Dedra ever crossed that morality, he would turn.
Yeah. I think if she betrayed what his concept of justice is, he would maybe want to kill her. Um,
That's kind of, that's what I was thinking, where
yeah,
this could go to a very bad place because he's
yeah.
upset. He's
Because
so obsessed.
he's fanatical
He's
in his
fanatical.
beliefs.
What could she possibly do you
There,
think, that could make, what would cross, because as of now, he thinks that she is the, you know,
well,
epitome of morality. And
well, here's the yeah. I mean, I think so far we haven't seen Cyril witness the quote unquote evil of the Empire. He's only witnessed their what's the word,
law
their
and
iron
order.
fist.
Yeah.
He's only experienced that, but do you like what if you told Cyril, hey, like they're like staging people dying and fabricating. Listen, what they're keeping prisoners and tricking them into, to they're torturing people with suffering of people they've killed. I'm not. Is that within his character to be okay with that? Because so far, what motivated his kind of crazy, drive for justice was he saw two people get killed by Andor and wanted to not avenge them, but bring Andor to justice.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that didn't seem out of context, a not noble cause. It seems like he was very law and order, but the Empire does not operate solely by law and order.
Correct.
So that's interesting to see if he would see Dedra, and maybe they showed us that clip of or that part. Well, no, yeah, there's the torture, and then there's the thing that Dedra, you had mentioned, like her getting excited about the idea of, I don't exactly remember what she was talking about staging with the, let's kill,
the
I don't remember, the accident, faking an accident. Maybe they showed us that for a reason. Maybe he would witness her doing that, and maybe she would fall a couple notches in his book,
Yeah.
So
That's such a
know.
good point.
Maybe he saves the pilot. That would be good. If he's like, oh my gosh,
Right?
Dedra's here and that pilot might crash into her. I'd better.
Right. So in a way, Cyril could be someone who ends up saving Andor at some point.
Well, there was and I don't want to bring up something too traumatic and dark, but a lot of these types, stalker, creepy admirers, they have an idealized version of the person that they admire.
Yes.
And this is actually exactly the reasoning behind John Lennon's assassin. Was he felt like John Lennon had
Let him down.
had let him down, and he was such an admirer of him that it drove him to go off the complete deep end. So maybe there's some type of story arc coming this way in which that's exactly what might happen. So
Yeah. And the Chop
Totally.
66, this is well said. He loves what he thinks she represents, not what she is. Exactly. Yeah. And it kind of does show, since he is lower, he has been lower in the Empire, just the different stratifications of the Empire, they are all privy to different amounts of knowledge regarding what they are doing. So yeah, for the people toward the bottom and bottom middle, but working class, etc. They don't know. They don't know what the ISB knows. They don't know what the military knows. And so I think that probably makes it easier to keep citizens in line, because they just think it's just law and order, right?
Yeah,
Standard.
they like seriously. I did read that book that you recommended, Xanthe, about
Lost
about the
Stars.
two Lost Stars, about the two cadets, and they genuinely believe
Yeah, they
that
do.
everything that the Empire does is for the better good of people. Like there
yeah,
is no doubt, and if there is doubt, it's very much suppressed because it's kind of like perceived as like talking bad about your mom. Like, why are you talking, like, why are you trash talking this person who's awesome? That's the feeling for sure. I want to
yeah.
see Cyril in Narkina 5.
Ooh.
And that would be an interesting way for that all to go down. I'm sure that won't happen really, but that would be pretty fascinating,
Like getting a
fascinating
tour of it?
transition. No, no, I want to like for him to like do something and get sentenced there.
Whoa.
Um, that would just be and then see Cassian and then like be all about this escape or something like that. I think that would be fascinating. And also I think that would be an interesting test. Like does like Dedra probably doesn't know about Narkina 5. I hope. I mean she might. Um
Okay. Got it. Okay, so there's many
So
more than we.
so the last Skywalker, Ray of Shadow, on Twitter said, well, there are 7 factory facilities on Narkina 5.
Yep.
There are 7 floors per facility. I guess 7 really is a thing. 7 rooms per floor, 7 tables per room, 7 men per table. Times 2 for night day shifts. Plus 2 managers per room. Kino is considered a manager, right?
Right.
And at least one med
med
tech.
34,307.
Totally. There's probably also food techs and stuff, like people who grind up the nutrients.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, yeah, so the Empire probably doesn't want to kill all of them, for sure now.
How about speaking of like how good was Andy Serkis in this
Oh, yeah.
episode? Like his
He
performance
was
is incredible.
great.
Very good.
God, acting is so good. Here's the part of the stream where James has a realization every week of how good this show is. Or I do this about every week. Guys, the show is so good.
Like, he cares about his men. Like, he cares about them.
I love that moment. I mean, everybody keeps talking about that last line of the. This was, I feel like, the best ending of an episode that we've had. I feel like in some ways, a lot of the episodes have felt like barely endings to an episode. You know, like they feel like they cut them in the middle because it's like feels like it's a one continuous story. This felt
Except for Luthen laughing.
Yeah, that's another one, right? But there's been like a number of episodes that haven't felt that way. This is definitely, I feel like, the best episode end, you know, that we've had so far. I think like that got me pumped.
It was. It felt like a movie ending.
Yeah, I felt like I was like, let's go. Like at the end, yeah, I was very like
yeah, and then like watching it out of context, I was like, this line was it never more than 12? Like, I never would have thought that line could have that significance by the end of of the show.
Yeah, for sure. But it's just like showing his turn to what he realizes he needs to do. And God, Andy Serkis is great. And it's too bad that the Empire is going to capture him and use his personality in their Palpatine clones. You know, it sucks that they're going to do that to him.
And it's such an efficient line to give him to convey his change. No.
Okay.
It's such an efficient line to convey his change of heart and mind because, first of all, it's been set up by...
Xanthe has no time to entertain that joke. Xanthe's like, no. Anyway, let me continue.
So, because the episode sets it up with Cassian asking him how many guards in each level, and he's just like, don't think that way. Get that out of your brain. Like, no. Like, you won't answer it. And then so, first of all, we're prepared. We're well prepared for this question when it comes up. And then, in my head, I was kind of rewriting the line a few times. Like, the answer is 12. The answer is basically 12, right? But never more than 12. What if he had said never fewer than 12, then you would have gotten like, okay, he's not on board. You know, he's just that that slight like that choice of words specifically is so efficient. So efficient. I like that.
Yeah.
It conveys his support for breaking out via his choice of words and the way he says it. He's just like, yep, no more than 12. This is going to be easy.
Never more than 12.
It's great
and
writing.
Doesn't even say like, I'm on board, let's do it. He's just like, yeah, just in context, what he says is, you get it. Okay, do you think it's funnier if Tony Gilroy is intentionally dunking by casting the guy who played Emperor as just some guy, or if he truly has no awareness that Andy Serkis was in a Star Wars?
What do you mean? What do you mean intentionally dunking?
Oh, like dunking on Star Wars by being like, you know, it'd be a funny joke if we cast Andy Serkis so that...
Is that a joke?
No,
What do you
no,
mean? I thought he was
I don't
awesome
think
as
it's...
Snoke.
No, I don't think it's a joke. I just think he's saying, do you think it's funnier if Tony Gilroy is intentionally trying to make it a joke? Or would it be funnier if he had no awareness that Andy Serkis was in a Star Wars? Basically, did Tony Gilroy know that Andy Serkis was in a Star Wars or not? I think he did.
Of course he did.
But
I mean, yeah. When you talk, I don't see how that's even possible that you would not know that.
well, I think it comes from like
What do you mean?
the
by
heavily
that?
publicized, Tony Gilroy going on the record saying he doesn't like Star Wars. He doesn't know Star Wars.
I don't know if he's said. Yeah, I don't know if.
I feel like those reports have been overblown, by the way, but
I don't think he's ever said he does not like Star Wars. He clearly does very much like Star Wars, considering how carefully he wrote this story in a way that makes amazing amounts of sense within the Star Wars universe. Like, I think it's very clear that he does like Star Wars. Maybe he doesn't like writing his stories in a way that feels cheap and unearned and playing into fan service and references that seemingly don't, like, I think he values writing over fan service, you know what I mean? I think that's probably where he's coming from. But I don't think I can't watch this show and not think it wasn't written by someone that has a pretty deep admiration of what is implied by the Star Wars story. Like,
so Gilroy has said in interviews that he's not a fan of Star Wars. He's not a fan. I don't know. But like,
well, I would take that to mean that he's not a fan in the way that, like, somebody that's, they've said certain things like even Rian Johnson has said, like, when he's standing there on set, he can't believe that he's directing Star Wars and he's looking at C-3PO and he's looking, you know what I mean? I think that Tony Gilroy would probably say that he's not like a fan, like a fanboy, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
like as an
probably
identity.
I think that's what he's meaning. That I don't think he's saying I dislike Star Wars. I think he's saying I am not a fan in the sense of like fanatic, like the of Star Wars. I think that's exactly what he means by that. Because I don't think you I don't think you do what he's done with this project if you don't have some type of appreciation for everything that's implied by the Star Wars story. I mean, he's creating a wonderful narrative that really digs into really truly what it might mean to be a rebel, what it truly might mean to work for the Empire, how the Empire might go about oppressing, a galaxy wide constituency. I think you don't write that story unless you like what you're doing.
I think
Yeah,
he
that's
likes
well
what he's
said.
doing, and I think he has an inspired story. But he has said in many interviews, and this is what a lot of people will cite. Like when he first came on for Rogue One, he has said that I was just explaining where the Chop 66's joke was coming from. Basically, was because the internet's talking about like, oh well, he doesn't like Star Wars, like kind of debating what that means. And like I'm with you, James. I don't think he would do this if he hated Star Wars, but he has been like when he signed on to Rogue One, he explained that he had no interest in Star Wars, and he thinks that may have benefited Rogue One in the end. I think that helped. He says it's effective on a doctoring job to have emotional detachment. You wouldn't want your cardiothoracic surgeon getting emotional. And so because he wasn't, he came into Rogue One to kind of help fix that stuff. And so he wasn't attached to Star Wars. He kind of had the emotional detachment. And so a lot of detractors of this show are sort of like, Tony Gilroy doesn't even like Star Wars. And then fans of the show...
It's almost like... Yeah.
Yeah, and then fans of the show are like, he thinks he's putting in no Easter eggs, but like he really is. And it really is, it's the spin of it. Like he's not a Star Wars fan. He's had not really that much interest in it. However, I think he obviously knows, well, first of all, he knows Rogue One, period, really well. And this kind of reminds me of when like famous musicians are like, I don't know how to read music, or like, I don't know any theory. But the thing is like, by the time a lot of people, like the Beatles, who couldn't read music, didn't know theory or whatever, by the time you get like at a certain, a few decades into doing something, or a few projects after working on a movie, the narrative, you may still have the same narrative of like, oh, I'm not a music theory, I'm not a trained musician, or I'm not a Star Wars person, but the reality of simply your experience kind of starts to defy that a little bit, and the narrative isn't necessarily.
Yeah, I think there's just such like an emotional identity that people put with a franchise like Star Wars, that if that isn't part of your identity, like people view it as that you don't get it, or you're on the outside of it, or something like that. But I think like you're right. I think it's like, in fact, actually there was a very similar interview with Dave Grohl, the drummer of Nirvana, to what you're describing, in which he sells himself short as a drummer, as like he's like, oh, like he's talking to Pharrell Williams, and he's like, don't ever call me a good drummer because I was just ripping off disco drummers, and which is hilarious because Dave Grohl, his drumming on those two Nirvana albums that he drummed on is like, I think, defines part of their sound and is why their sound is so unique and definitive of the grunge genre, is because he wasn't playing like a punk drummer and he wasn't playing like a metal drummer. He was playing like a disco drummer playing really hard grunge. And so it's funny that he doesn't view himself as like a particularly proficient rock or grunge drummer, even though the reason why he's so good at doing that is because he was bringing in fresh perspective. So I would liken that, but I don't think you could ever accuse Dave Grohl in a million years of like not loving punk and grunge music. And I think so. That's what I'm saying is like, Gilroy might not be a fanboy like what's his name, Jon Favreau. Like, I think those two have different approaches to the way they approach Star Wars. Like, Favreau clearly comes in as someone that he's even said, it's like I'm playing with my action figures, right? In the way he writes and the way he directs, right? And Tony Gilroy comes in and he's not feeling like he's just playing with his action figures. He's like, I'm going to approach this franchise less like I'm a person that remembers playing with these things when I was a child, and more like let me approach this as a filmmaker and a writer working within this universe. But I wouldn't ever accuse him of not liking Star Wars for that reason,
Yeah, no argument
that.
there.
Accuse him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's what it comes. That's I guess the word. That's why I use that word, is because Star Wars fans accuse people of not getting or liking Star Wars all the time. It's like, how dare you not be like indoctrinated by Star Wars the way we all are. So
Kind of like how the Empire does that.
it's a little bit, right?
Similar to what the Empire does.
Yeah.
Yes. No.
Yeah, I mean, I
got
think
me horribly.
as always, the way people define themselves is not always the multiple levels of reality. That's why just taking statements. Anyway, so
guys, Ziggy isn't going to let me be on the call much longer.
I feel like we're ready to wrap up.
I think we did it.
Yeah.
We did it, everybody. It
Yeah. So that was Andor episode 9.
was awesome.
Yeah. Next week, I think we'll be wrapping up that arc. So it should be exciting.
Can't wait for Thrawn to be in this show.
Stop.
Yeah.
No.
Don't you feel like that? Don't you feel like Tony Gilroy could write Thrawn though, like the right way?
If you read the material that came before, I think maybe.
Yeah, but don't you think like
I feel like he might have the perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you think like you've been nervous about Thrawn being in some of the Filoni projects?
Yeah.
And I think, as much as I love Dave Filoni, I feel like I'm a little skeptical on how he's going to write Thrawn too, considering how big of a fan of Thrawn I am and how much I've spent reading his books.
James.
And
What a poser.
I accuse you of
accuse
not
you.
being Thrawn.
yeah, that's right. I mean, Xanthe could yell at me about Thrawn until
I've
they're
never
blue in the
yelled at
face,
you about that.
You know?
No. You know I would never do that. No.
You missed my Thrawn pun, but that's okay.
Oh wait, no. I'm sad I missed your Thrawn pun.
I said you could yell at me about Thrawn until you're blue in the face.
Oh.
That's good.
That's pretty bad, right? It's pretty bad. Sorry.
It's fine.
I like it.
Yeah.
Christina liked
Pretty
it.
awful. Thanks,
Anyway.
everybody.
I liked it.
We'll be back next week.
Swinging a chiss on that one.
Just that was okay. Yeah, that one was worse. So. Yes. Wait.
Sorry.
Let me find my right sound for our exit.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Okay. Here we go. All right. All right, everyone. See you next week.
Like it's like we're walking out of church right now.